I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Got a special guest for you today. He is researcher and host of the Underclass podcast. First time on the channel, Austin Wade Picard. Austin, thanks for coming on.
Of course, brother. And we probably did like half of the show just privately just now. It was a lot of fun, honestly. It felt very comfortable and easy in terms of our dialogue and communication back and forth. And so I'm eager to honestly just start the show. And I appreciate you for having me on. Let's just say I've seen you from a distance for quite some time, as I said privately, and I feel like this has just almost been inevitable, and it's about time we made this happen. So I appreciate you, man. Honestly.
I know. As I'm saying, first time on the channel, I'm thinking, man, we should have done this a long time ago. But I'm happy.
Right.
I'm happy to do it today, and I've caught some of your shows over the years. You do a great job, man, as well. And so it's I'm excited. Yeah, we did almost like a mini episode leading up to this, but so I'm gonna try to get us to jump back in that. But before I get carried away, tell everybody about your shows and do your plugs, my friend.
Awesome. Will do. So I'm the host of the Underclass podcast, which is, my main show. I have a couple other shows that are under that umbrella. But that's where all my solo projects and also I have a weekly show with Jose Galison from No Way Jose. It's called Already Dead. We do it every Tuesday at like 9:30 Eastern time. So it's we call it Schizo Bros Assemble for the weekly call-in conspiracy variety show, which is kind of, I don't know. It's a reflection of the way in which our minds kind of function, and it's difficult because we're trying to navigate through the media cycle throughout the past week and attempt to interpret it in an objective way, right? But so we're always just touching on the more relevant and timely subjects usually, and then we'll take certain directions based on whatever we've been researching over the past couple weeks as well, each Tuesday. So that's always a good time. Also, I have a paywalled show called Whatever This Is with me and Brad Binkley from the Propaganda Report podcast and Sam Tripoli from Tinfoil Hats. So it's always a really good time, man. We also do something similar, but it's kind of just in terms of the brevity a little bit, just kind of having the willingness to engage with an open mind without judgment, but also kind of trying to find the fun in this, right? Because I feel like so much of that is lost in just the level of consequences and the darkness involved in the details in terms of just not even psychological operations, but just how power sort of functions in general, and understanding. I don't know. I think from day one, I've been sort of very disillusioned by the political process in general, and so I kind of opt out of the two-party paradigm. I feel like it's a delusion to keep you engaged in the system, and it only inevitably benefits the permanent establishment of pedophiles who are seemingly running DC politics. So, I don't know. Beyond that, I think, as I said, the best place to support me is always the Patreon if you have the means. But other than that, subscribe to the Underclass podcast on basically all platforms, YouTube and Rumble, specifically if you can. And that's basically it for me, my friend.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll have his links below. Everyone go down there and check out his stuff and show him some love if you haven't checked out his show already. And Already Dead, you guys do a good job of keeping things light on there as well. It's a balance though. I mean, I know there's a time to be serious with some of this stuff. And then you guys also kind of have fun around it too. So it's a
Right.
delicate balance. You guys do that well in that show.
Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, man, it's all about like putting the information out there, and it gets heavy sometimes, but figuring out a way to have fun at the same time, man. That's really what it's all about. It's like walking that tightrope. And speaking of your show, I was listening to some of the Underclass this weekend because I knew you were gonna come on, and I went deep, man. I went way back. I was like, I'm gonna find some deep tracks here. So I did, and I found a show that you did on the Nazis,
Oh
and it
man.
caught my eye. I listened to that, and so I've gone deep into that history as well. And you were saying things that I hadn't heard anybody else talk about or say or acknowledge. Some of the stuff that I found interesting when I was looking into it that I just don't hear anybody talking about. So I definitely wanted to ask you about some of that today. But yeah, you did
Awesome.
this episode on the Nazis and Nazi occultism, and I was like, I didn't know this guy was talking about this. Like I would have like rang you up long before if I knew that I guess knew that you knew about this stuff, because when I was talking about this stuff, I was like, nobody's going to believe me. This is not in, there's like one documentary that talks about this, and you actually had that documentary some in your show.
That's awesome.
Outside of that, it's like 80 years of World War II documentaries. Just really, I think, fail to mention the Nazi occultism stuff.
Yeah. 100%, man.
Definitely
And I
wanted to
think
ask
that's
you
by
about that.
design, right?
Mm,
Just as far as they would love for us to fall victim to the simplistic, cartoonish narrative of black hats and white hats. And I feel like it's never that simple. This is an oversimplification by design for us to effectively, I think, engage in this false version of reality, in this false framework where we can't quite properly assess and identify the root cause of anything. Like and when it boils down to it, I feel like so much of what they've been able to achieve is this level of deliberate deception that I never realized how again, just how efficient and effective it has become, and as far as systematically entrenched over time. And I do believe that the vast majority of recorded history and that, the annals of recorded history are sort of this again, this naive, vulnerable version of reality that just doesn't actually fit in terms of just how just the human sort of kind of the in a way it's almost missing the entire context of the human element, right? And I think that if you're willing to embrace reality in this sort of um, larger than life, and it feels as if it falls perfectly in place with how we've been very well conditioned throughout Hollywood, and this level of almost, it's like the vast majority of people, I feel like, are fundamentally suffering in the midst of an identity crisis, and they're trying to figure out, it's almost as if they never quite became comfortable enough in their own skin to have a well established understanding of who they are and who they want to be, and that this is an ever evolving thing that you have to reflect on any given day, and hope to better yourself throughout that process. But only through those checks and balances can you become a better person. And if you are not hyperactive, consciously aware, then you're going to be taken for a ride. And unfortunately, I feel like inevitably that leads many people into facilitating dystopian agendas that they would never actually accept, or as far as ethically speaking, would never actually embrace if they knew what the true intentions, underlying intentions were, and the intent behind these diabolical kind of the dystopian outcome, right? The pretext that is consistently being achieved, and so I see totalitarianism throughout the course of historical examples that we can point to, like, let's just say, World War II, and how I feel it's been misinterpreted, from this lens that is very, you know, I feel like the if we are to kind of embrace the actual just in a way the historical narrative attached to World War II as a conflict, then it's basically staged the vast majority of the general public's ability to even foundationally speaking engage in the modern paradigm of power itself. And so it's basically how you interpret World War II has now kind of evolved into how you interpret the political paradigm at large, and also the political puppets. And so I think, Hitler was more than likely, in my opinion, just a political puppet, like most are, and I do believe that he very well could have even been a mind-controlled male prostitute in Vienna in the early 1900s, just after World War I, which is fascinating. Now, many people have claimed this is a product of Jewish propaganda, which is possible, and it's definitely something we have to be willing to consider. But still,
I think that they were
the level of
occultists for sure, though. I just want to throw that in there because I think they left that out at Nuremberg.
Absolutely, man.
There's several reasons why I think that they left it out. I think, for one, the more reasonable assumption would be that they didn't want the Nazis to be able to claim insanity. So they didn't
Right.
For that alone, I think some of them were like, all right, let's not let them talk about the occult stuff. There's other reasons, I'm sure, but for whatever reason, the occult side of this was hidden. And I think all the things that you said about Hitler could be true, but I also think he could have been an occultist. And I think
I definitely believe he was an occultist.
And I could tell you why, at some point, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I think that, if you remember, there's some footage that's very difficult to find of basically, I believe it was Rudolf Hess in the Nuremberg trials. He was found guilty. Yeah. I believe it was Rudolf Hess during his trial and conviction in the Nuremberg trials, when they cut his mic. He had a live mic, and he says that the entire nation of Germany was under mind control, and they cut his mic. And I'll just never forget that moment, because that was something that and again, this doesn't at all, I believe occultism is involved with mind control inherently. I think you have to dabble in black magic to play the game of psychologically controlling a person's mind. And I think that this is witchcraft. It just, at its, foundational, just in terms of the implementation of the behavioral modification experimentation. This is beyond a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion, bathed in the dark arts, right? This is black magic. And
it's like Manly P. Hall. I've got the book over here. I've brought it up before on the show, and he talks about the Egyptian priestcraft and how that they were ruling the pharaohs like puppets, but there was still that occult element there, and they had figured out ways to control large swaths of the population with whatever mind control tactics they were using back then. But he called it Egyptian state priestcraft, the art of using the occult to run a nation.
Right. Yeah. See, and that's what I feel like potentially was taking place.
Sorry, one more thing. Hess may have been like reflecting back on something like that. He had time to think. He turned himself over to the British, or whatever happened there. He flew a plane and said he wanted to talk with Churchill and some of the royal family. And
Aleister Crowley, man.
Yeah.
He's basically in a robe with runes, occult runes on it. And he's essentially that was the claim, is that he was in from a geographical a great distance, geographically speaking. He's in a black magic conflict, a war of the occult, engaging in black magic with Aleister Crowley, dressed in a robe filled with occult runes, when he took that single engine plane to the UK and it got shot down. Yeah, he legitimately had a wizard's robe on, And it's just fascinating to me that
So he said he was like in a wizard's battle with a Crowley.
with Aleister Crowley in the
You know what that
UK, and
reminds me
that was the
of?
entire reason he was going there, was
Oh,
because
that's crazy.
yes,
Dude,
it's
that's
the
crazy.
craziest story, man. I
Yeah.
know. And there was, I believe, Hitler, Trotsky, uh, Freud, and Stalin all allegedly lived in the same place in Vienna post World War One. That blew my mind because when
That's
I
crazy.
discovered the fact that they claimed Hitler was potentially, given mind control manuals from Tavistock in I believe it. I'll find the which Tavistock location it was because the facility matters, and it's fascinating because it seems as if he was legitimately studying these mind control manuals, at least according to the memoirs of Bridget Hitler, I believe was that source. But when I looked this up not too long ago, there's a specific BBC reference from 2013 in April, and it says 1913, when Hitler, Trotsky, Tito, Freud, and Stalin all lived in the same place. And it goes on about how essentially they were they were frequenting Hitler, Trotsky, Stalin, and Freud, of all people, right? Freud, who would
Yeah.
effectively, you know, lead to this very well accepted in terms of psychiatry and just mode and method of therapy in a way, right? Psychologically speaking, Freud is a very a crucial and vital, prominent figure in that context,
Crucial.
obviously.
Yeah,
And
he's up there with Marx and Darwin with how he affected the
100%.
currents of humanity and just the fact they were all there together. And Freud would also go on to have in his lineage Edward Bernays, Mr.
Oh
Propaganda
my God,
himself,
of
which
course.
we don't have to. I know you could probably riff on that like crazy, but hey, just real quick with the Hitler thing.
Hmm.
And this is what Manly Pugh said in his chapter on ceremonial magic and sorcery. He said he's talking about this group that black magic dictated the state religion and paralyzed the intellectual and spiritual activities of the individual by demanding their complete and unhesitating acquiescence to the dogma formulated by the priestcraft. And then
Wow.
here's the kicker. The pharaoh became a puppet in the hands of the priestcraft.
Oh my God. It's, it's amazing how much they admit, and
Yeah.
that's something that I very much value and appreciate. And so it's what I've tried to, prioritize is when they come out with the clear language. It's there's no way in which you could misinterpret this. They are saying what they mean. And thank God for it at times because we
Mhm.
can hang them by their own words. And it's something that I cherish because I think too many people are unaware of those smoking gun examples that we can point to that very clearly establishes their motivation, and the reason in which and their goals, and the agenda items they hope to achieve. I mean, they've illustrated this in a very detailed way over the course of many generations, and so it's something that's hard to deny by now, But
Was
yeah,
was was Trotsky, Freud, was Stalin around?
yeah, Stalin was hanging around with them as well,
They were
and
all.
it
Was
looks
this
like
in Vienna?
yes. So Trotsky and Stalin were just two of a number of men who lived in central Vienna in 1913, according to the BBC, and whose lives were destined to mold, indeed to shatter, much of the 20th century. This is the language they use. It was a disparate group. The two revolutionaries, Stalin and Trotsky, were on the run. Sigmund Freud was already well established. The psychoanalyst exalted by followers as the man who opened up the secrets of the mind, lived and practiced on the cities of Bergassi. I don't know. So the point being is that you have each of these individuals. Basically, you had Hitler's home about 1.1.25 miles, 2 kilometers from Trotsky's coffee house. You had Sigmund Freud's home near Freud's coffee house, very close by Trotsky's. Trotsky's home was about a mile. You had Emperor Franz Joseph's residence apparently was also nearby, and Archduke Franz Ferdinand of all people who would spark the war the war in terms of World War One, right?
Yeah.
And entirely redefine and restructure the just the global map in general, right? And yeah, Stalin's home was like a
See,
mile.
that's a lot of key players in that century in particular in
Yep.
in one place. So it begs the question, it's like, if these guys were being manipulated by a group of some sort, I don't know, maybe a Tavistock type of a thing,
Yeah.
where they then
And a
sent out.
Freemasonic lodge allegedly in that area. So you have the Tavistock Institute in that spot, right? Again, I'll pull the exact institute or location in just a moment, but this is fascinating to me because you have this Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, right? Which obviously Hitler was affiliated with, apparently for a short time. You have something called, as far as Thunder at Twilight, is some sort of a painting, I believe, which was created by Frederick Morton or something, I think was the artist. And it's Hitler and his fellow lodgers, which I found to be a very interesting description because obviously I think these Freemasonic Alpha lodges that they are pivotal in structuring not only international conflicts, but they legitimately, it was the Alpha Freemasonic lodges of the UK which caused the Operation Clockwork Orange in Ireland to legitimately tear Ireland in half, right, and cause this massive civil war, and it was all staged by the international intelligence apparatus, and they just reaped the benefits from the peasant class being entirely destroyed in Ireland throughout that time. And Kincora Boys' Home scandal happened throughout that time as well, which of course it would. Right, these failed states are great opportunistic windows and avenues for exploiting the lowest levels of just in terms of society in general. And so, therefore, children with no protectors or guardians are extraordinarily vulnerable and high priority targets in those moments. And it's a sad state of the world. But there was one
I've got
other
one.
additional layer. Oh, go ahead,
Oh,
bud.
sorry. I've
Sorry.
got one for you on Freemasonic Lodge connection.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. I'll try to look it up because I've got it in my research, but just off of a memory, there was a huge Freemasonic conference in Geneva, I think it was. It was in Switzerland, but all the Germans came down.
Mhm.
And members of the Thule Society were there. This is before the Nazi Reich. But
Right.
they're all there. Aleister Crowley's also there. And there's a bunch of other names too. Crowley is giving a presentation on the Gnostic Mass. He's trying to get all the Freemason lodges to participate and include not his Gnostic Mass. So
Wow.
I'll give you all the info on it later if you're interested. But basically, what you had was people who were about to become Nazis in this room listening to Crowley. And connecting and networking and all that. And then after that, the Thules, all that sparks off. All those occultists become the Nazis. We could talk about that too, but what were you
Absolutely.
saying? I just wanted to tell you about that.
Oh, you're good.
It's crazy.
I thought that the fact that art piece, Hitler haranguing his fellow lodgers or something is what it was titled. But it claims this was depicting morality, racial purity, the German mission, and Slav treachery on Jews, Jesuits, and Freemasons. So I thought, again, we have, this is it shouldn't at all be surprising to us. It's just reinforcing, and it feels like it lends credibility to what we already are very, at least the impression that I am under in terms of the level of occultism being practiced by and the Thule Society chose Hitler as the representative that they wanted to push forward. And I forget the terminology they used. It was just, this is the claim through Thule Society and Germanen Orden, I believe, is what it's reference to. Before Hitler came, is this strange. Basically, it's from the
Sabbatdorf.
Journal of Modern History, is what it comes from. It's what it was published in '63, and it's called Before Hitler Came, and it's by Reginald Feltz, and it's fascinating stuff, man. It basically goes into, because what's interesting to me is that clearly you had Hitler and Germanism or something was basically this occult folk. It's this ancient folklore of the Germanic peoples. And it's very interesting because they seem to lean heavily into this prophecy of some kind culturally being fulfilled in the context of the occult. It felt like a manufactured false prophecy to essentially stage the new structure of government in a real, but also manufacture consent and generate the consent among the people to legitimately believe that this is the second coming in a way of, right, the Ubermensch, right? But the quote is Hitler and Germanism. If anything is unfolkish, it is this tossing around of old Germanic expressions which neither fit into the present period nor represent anything definite. I had to warn again and again against those Deutsch Volkisch wandering scholars who rave about old Germanic heroism, about dim prehistory, stone axes, spear and shield. This was Adolf Hitler and Mein Kampf, right? So the fact that he legitimately was referencing this ancient Germanic heroism that was essentially being presented by these Deutsche Volkisch wandering scholars. It seems like this was being embedded into culture, into the cultural zeitgeist in Germany, leading up to their willingness to embrace, the alternative, which was also a huge consequence following World War I, because clearly they were in major economic turmoil and in a extraordinary crisis. I mean, in terms of the German people, they were desperate. They were desperate for a savior, and so if you stage that narrative in a way that would benefit you as the ruling class or as this small cabal of prominent individuals who have a dystopian sort of agenda at play, then they can sell this and package it in this palatable way to the public, and
Yeah,
they're not
that
going
was
to engage at a
yeah that
higher intellectual level with this propaganda.
absolutely, man. That's exactly, it's well said. I think that's exactly what happened there. It was the undercurrent. It was the opium of the masses. They used the parts of the Volkish movement to be the sort of unofficial state religion, from what I could tell. And what it was is Volkish, I think, is folk in German. So it was a folk movement, but it was a folk magic movement. It was like
Honestly, man.
they were practicing old pagan ceremonies and everything, and the German people were involved with this. So it creates this canvas for the real hardcore Nazi occultists that went
Hmm.
shot right up in the party. Hess, Rosenberg, those guys. This was like Himmler. This was like their canvas. They're like, well, the people are primed for this anyway. So we can tack on our more darker occult agendas. That's in a simplified way. I think that's kind of what was happening.
100%, man. And that was the way I introduced it in my episode on it. And by the way, Hitler and the Nazi Occult is the name of the episode, and it was almost instantly removed from YouTube. So
Crazy.
yeah, of course it was. It was
Of
among a
course.
few others that it was that Hitler and the Nazi Occult, my Pizzagate episode, and also the episode I did on JFK, the assassination of JFK. They were all strangely and suspiciously removed from YouTube for no apparent reason. But anyway,
Yeah.
it it
And it's crazy because the that particular episode with the Nazis, that's the one I listened to. It's well done. I'm glad you shouted it out. I do encourage people to check it out, but it's not anything super crazy. It's not um Hitler was building UFOs and establishing a base on the moon,
right.
and like they were talking to Nordic greys in Antarctica, and the real society, the maidens with the long hair were channeling. It was none of that stuff. This, what you were doing was just putting in it, that you were filling in the cracks of World War II history with stuff that's just not really talked about much. But it's not that crazy, right?
No. And that's
It's
what
it's
kind
wild that
of,
they would remove that in
I know.
2024 or whatever it was.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. Was at first I was a little surprised, and then I thought it through, and I thought, what are the consequences of people waking up to the fact that World War II wasn't what it seems, right? That and in no way am I out here. And one day I am hoping to potentially cover a Holocaust denial episode, but not in the context of denying that it happened or denying that people died. In no way. It would be basically presenting an alternative narrative to the factual discrepancies in terms of the Holocaust as a tragic event, in human history. And through poking the holes in the official narrative, only then are we able to kind of put together this fundamental sense of what potentially could have happened. And I think that if we're unable to go about that process in an objective way, then how on earth can we come to some sort of applicable and vital conclusion that will essentially lead us forward in a way in which we could hold power accountable? That's not. I feel as if they want to remain insulated from accountability as much as humanly possible, and only through deliberate deception are they able to achieve this. And it's up to us to not, essentially not fall victim to these empty threats, right? That they're attempting to just what affect your in terms of your views or your output in terms of being a content creator. They want to stranglehold your ability, bottleneck you in a real way as far as your what is it, freedom of speech, not freedom of reach. That woman said, who was placed at the head of the World Economic Forum, and essentially Elon Musk hired her on Twitter after he took over to save free speech in America, right? Which is obviously, this is all tongue in cheek. I'm sure you
Yeah.
know my opinion on this, but
Yeah.
as far as like the unwillingness for people to even recognize the fact that why was Adolf Hitler obsessed with hunting down the Spear of Longinus, right? Or otherwise known as the Spear of Destiny, the Holy Lance, right? Which obviously was believed to have pierced the side of Jesus Christ during the crucifixion, and is a holy relic of, that apparently holds ancient power. And I think through blood ritual, people don't understand, through these strange, what's it called when you have essentially a physical item, a talisman, right? Where
Right.
this is something that I was unaware of for quite some time until I researched more deeply into the occult and their esoteric ideology and their strange physical exercise of the ritual. And through seeing all these various examples and different ideological practices of these very strange ritual, it seems as if talismans do fundamentally play a part in certain avenues of thought as far as these schools of ideology in the process of the ritual. And apparently physical matter, human matter, plays a role and can play a role depending on the individual who in their belief system. But we're talking a talisman that could be covered in human excrement, covered in period blood, right? Not to be, too disgustingly graphic, but this is legitimate. This is what Aleister Crowley practiced with sex magic, right? It's like you have cum, you have period blood, you have these various bodily fluids and things of that nature that apparently can harness different. Basically, it's how you engage in the ritual and what factors into the process will apparently harness power in various ways. And this is again outside of my wheelhouse. Obviously, I'm not an occultist. I'm just trying to make sense of this. And so
You're right.
why on earth?
That's how they would use a talisman. That's one
Exactly.
instance in the Crowleyan sex magic way, and there's other ways as well. Yeah.
100%.
So
And that's
these
something.
items had value to the Nazis in that sense, big time.
Exactly. And that's why I always found it just fascinating that obviously you would have this example in this case where Hitler had this obsession and fascination with the spear of Longinus. And again, this, I feel like we are not quite in the proper framework psychologically to engage in why on earth, in what sort of objective way could we internalize why and he was pursuing this, right? And so unless you kind of place it in its proper place in terms of the occult context, I'm not necessarily certain we can come to a conclusion otherwise, right? And so that's something that it's I feel like occultism is the primary factor if you're going to attempt to interpret the official, right, just at the very least interpret the conflict of World War II in general, and also the lead up and the rise of Hitler.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to engage honestly with all the details that are available to us, I mean, then you inevitably find yes, obviously the featuring of these Volkish groups, as you mentioned, old Germanic folklore in a way, right? It was being glorified. I think the Thule Society, it was Rudolf von Sabotendorf, which I found to be a prominent figure, worthwhile in mentioning, because again, this is when it boils down to it. I mean, Sabotendorf is kind of very influential.
Yeah. Real quick, I just want to say that I think Hitler may have actually got a hold. Just a side note here, I think he may have actually got a hold of the Spear of Destiny,
right?
And they said it was in a museum in Vienna during the start of the war. And Vienna, going back to the mind control that you were talking about, the Nazis had such a command over people and such the mind control was working to their benefit so much that that Austria allowed the Germans just to march in and they were like, "Here, take us. We're here for you. Come on in." They threw them a parade. The Nazis invaded, but they got a parade, and they went straight to that museum and got what was supposed to be the Spear of Destiny. But it's interesting because Hitler said he had visited that museum as a boy and walked up to the spear and got a download from it. Now, I don't think he used the word download, obviously, but he said that he felt he had a telepathic message pop in his head when he was, and that it was telling him that he was to be some sort of a leader of the German people. That was one of the craziest stories I found when I looked at it.
That is insane, honestly. Yeah. And it really, that specifically lends credibility to, at the very least, as far as this was how Hitler thought. This was the framework of his mind, as far as like he legitimately apparently was guided by a voice that he heard. And he even gave it a name. He referred to it as Providence, right? And this was all, it was the Tavistock Institute at Devon in Ireland, right? Where he allegedly received training at the British military PSYOP war school. That's the claim. And so apparently, but again, this is something where I think it's important to realize that obviously Hitler had a fascination with Helena Blavatsky, right? And I think that that's important to at the very least recognize, because just in terms of the Rosicrucian connection to so much of I legitimately view the foundation of America as a Rosicrucian mission in a real way, and I believe it was David Livingstone who has I think it's a pen name or pseudonym, but he has a very interesting website called Ordo ABKO, which is obviously order out of chaos, and he goes into, there's a fascinating, I think it's called the Aryan Christ. It's a long article, and very detailed investigative article that provides this amazing avenue of research and evidence into what led to the foundation of the Thule Society, in utilizing that old Germanic folklore at the time that was making this major a sort of what's it called when it's uh, resurgence, right? In a certain sort of sense. But anyway, so it looks like, I mean, in terms of this underlying influence behind the rise of Hitler, right? That's the issue at hand, and it seems as if there was a legitimate amount of evidence that drew to mind control training that he was apparently a victim of through this British military psychological operations at war school at Tavistock. And so, if that happened, and we're to believe, obviously, that Adolf Hitler he's born in what, April 20th, obviously, and I think it was almost exactly 9 months after the murders of Jack the Ripper, which I always found to be interesting, right?
That's
Not
wild.
that it matters. Yeah.
I was actually gonna ask you about that because I've heard you talk about this before.
Hmm.
So I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah, it was April 20th, 1889, I
Yep.
think is Hitler's birthday. And that might come up later because I want to ask you about something with that. That's a very Easter centric. That's an Easter date.
Right.
April 19th and 20th. Easter falls on those days, some years. But so Hitler's born in 89, but the Ripper murders were in 88. So it's like, was there some occult stuff happening there with those murders? Were those rituals? Were they trying to bring something into the world in the form of a child?
Yeah. And that's what the implication was, is if the killings were sort of part of some dark ritual to potentially even performed by the Golden Dawn, right? To basically bring about the birth of this, what I think Livingstone even himself, let me pull it because it's so funny the way he describes him. He says, yeah, here it is. So he says essentially to bring some sort of mind controlled messiah of chaos, which I thought was a great way to describe him, right?
Yeah.
And Aleister Crowley was even implicated as his handler, but obviously, I mean, that's a little too far off. And yeah, it would be I don't know. In what world would that be outside of the realm of consideration, but it's possible. Anyway, the fact that you have, the
Curly
Rosicrucian
Curly got
Society,
around. He got around.
hell yeah, he got around.
He made
He's
his
got the
rounds.
craziest story as well, as far as he's basically like this trust fund kid who was just going
Yeah,
all over the world, allegedly, if you believe what he wrote, right?
right.
He allegedly traveled to these places, but
They had a
anyway,
beer. They had a beer and sandwich business that the family did. I, if
wow,
if I remember correctly, they had their own business and it went well, and that was all legacy money that he inherited. Sort of like the
hilarious.
guy who wrote Naked Lunch. Um,
Oh, okay.
what's his name? I got the book over there. Uh, uh, it's not Hunter S. Thompson. It's another William S. Burroughs.
Oh, yeah,
Similar,
yeah.
very similar because he was an occultist too. He
Hmm.
just got handed all this money from his parents, and they would just travel and do lots of drugs and do magic. It's
Right.
almost identical to Crowley in that sense.
That's so crazy, dude. I think, yeah, as far as the level of just the Rosicrucian tie-in to the Tool Society, you had, this major Rosicrucian organization that was clearly a part of kind of the infancy of the rise of the Tool, and how it was just founded in a real way by Zabottendorf. And I think whenever just in terms of it was Ariosophy, I believe, was this interesting, occult. Uh,
Least Guido von
yes,
Least. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And so understanding that basically you have this fusion, right, of basically you have theozoology, Areo-Christianity, and Ariosophy were three separate kind of prominent and vital, considerations and lines of thought in terms of these fascist agitators at the time, and apparently Adolf Joseph Lanz was one of which, and apparently, again, this is personal friends with Zabatendorf, right? And basically, this is before the Thule Society, before the German Orden. You had the Order of the New Templars, obviously, Ordo Novi Templi, and this is a proto-fascist secret society in Germany that basically was founded by von Liebenfels, I think was the name, something to that effect, and that was inevitably the code name of Adolf Joseph Lanz. So you have these interesting kind of fused together occult ideology in a way to create a new age, in a certain sense, belief structure that would apply directly into the tool. And that's what it seems like, at the very least, was potentially happening. And so you have
And
kind
these
of
guys were
Lanz,
influencing. They were influencing all the big Nazis that were to come. Like
100%.
Hitler was very informed and plugged into what these guys were saying, as was Himmler. As
Hmm.
so you're right about early on with this Volkish movement. Like Himmler was big on using the Volkish movement as like this tapestry for them to build on top of, pulling from ideas from these guys, like the Rudolf
Right.
von Sabbatendorf, Guido von List, and there's a couple others. And that's when they get Carl Villa get into the picture, and they put him as a head shaman of sorts over the SS at Wewelsburg Castle. The whole thing was
Right.
just this.
Oh my God.
That's what's groundbreaking to me about that show you did, because you're setting all this up for people to have an understanding of it. And I guess that's where the threat therein lies to the
Right.
mainstream. It's not, it's crazy in that sense. Like it's crazy that wow, this is like more the truth here. Like oh, they were
Yeah.
really using occultism to propel this thing. It's crazy in that sense. But
Hmm.
as a shock, as like shock like that, okay, we weren't taught that in school. But in another sense, it's like okay, this is like more of the truth. Why can't we just let this, it's been 80 plus years. Why can't we just let it out now? Why can't we just let this be
Because
known?
occultism is alive and well and living in DC, right?
There you
And
go.
I
There you
just
go, man.
I feel like it has to be the just the covert kind of ideological background, that applies to the vast majority of the ruling class. And that's what it feels like in terms of the German experiment at this time, and having what the Templars so closely associated and connected to these various orders that led up to the tool being founded and created, which apparently was the Cistercians were a part of this. You had Bernard von Clairvaux, who was the founder of the Cistercian order. And so he had also written the monastic rules of the Templars and later praised them for their use in the Crusades. So this is how longstanding this
Mhm.
occultism has been playing a vital part in global politics and in world conflicts, man. I mean, that's what I found crazy about the occult roots of National Socialism, just in general. It has occult roots. And if you look into, it was Lanz himself who I had mentioned a moment ago, who was going by this code name. At least Lanz, Adolf Joseph Lanz, is his code name, basically. But if you look into the occult roots of National Socialism, it was Lanz who essentially conceived the idea that the Templars had the goal of establishing an Aryan empire across the entire Mediterranean area. He interpreted the persecution of the Templars from 1312 as a triumph of racially inferior people whose aim was to undermine the rule and purity of the Aryan race. He was also convinced that the Catholic Church had been suppressing true Christian teaching since that time, as the core of which he regarded his ideas of a racial struggle. So this is all playing a part into essentially the new beginning of the crusade against lower races that had been interrupted for centuries. this was his own order, is what he claimed that he had to fulfill. So the belief was essentially that Christ was actually Aryan and not Jewish. I found that to be a very interesting point. And the Jewish Christ is considered to be a great deception intended to subvert Christianity into worshiping a Jew. This was legitimately how. Hey, who knows?
They
But
had their own conspiracy theories about everything.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was in 33 that you had a German author named Otto Rahn who published a series of books tying the Holy Grail, the Templars, and the Cathars to modern German nationalist mythology. So, according to Rahn, the Grail was a symbol of a pure Germanic religion repressed by Christianity. Rahn's book inspired interest in the Grail within Nazi occultist circles and led to the SS chief Heinrich Himmler's sponsorship of Rahn's search for the Grail. So this is how the Nazis would inevitably, go in search of the Holy Grail as well.
So
Another,
I've read one of Ron's books, Otto Ron. I've read one of his
yeah.
books, and he was going all across. This was when he was working or answering to Himmler directly, and he was going across all of Spain and France, visiting the old Templar sites, the old
My God.
Cathar sites, and the Albigensian like fortresses and all that, and he's documenting the whole thing, and that just goes to show this Templar threat that I think that you're highlighting nicely here. There's this crazy Templar threat to this whole thing
They
because
said the Neo-Templar Renaissance is essentially
yeah,
what, and the Green Order, this Luciferian society internationally, is tied into this Neo-Templar Renaissance, which allegedly, dates back to, I forget the date when I think it was the Pope had the major Templars burned at the stake. What was it?
13.
Yeah,
I don't remember the
I
rest
can't
of it.
remember the date anymore, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it was in October in early 1300s,
hmm
1314 maybe. I'll look it up.
And the fact that, just in terms of the the Templar and Masonic connections to so much of just really the most prominent recorded moments in ancient history, but more relevant, obviously, recent history, and obviously is what we're referring to in terms of World War II. But I'm just saying, like, if we're dealing with the establishment of the new Aryan Empire and the kind of psychological implementation of their own Aryan Christ figure, which is exactly what I think they were playing into in a real way, as far as this Germanic religion that was being repressed by the mainstream Catholic Christianity is essentially what he was presenting to the public. And but there was an interpretation that considered it to be the Holy Grail, as far as it was the cup that obviously, just generally speaking, the belief is that it's the cup that was used to gather the blood of Jesus, right?
Oh, yeah. So Ron also included an interesting thought that they thought maybe it wasn't actually a cup, it was a stone of some sort, like a holy stone, like an
hmm
asteroid of some sort. And that's what I was thinking about when you said something about the Neo-Templars and reviving the true religion that it was always meant to be.
hmm
And that I don't know. It's too
Well, he's
convoluted in my head to
basically
explain.
saying he's basically saying that, in rather than being a cup that essentially gathered the blood of Jesus, and this obviously was the context of following the spear of Longinus piercing the side of Jesus during the crucifixion, is when the Grail gathered the blood. But in reality, he's essentially, Ron was presenting this as a possibility for it being interpreted as the pure Aryan bloodline, or the perfect genome, the Sangreal is what he called it. And so essentially you had this new symbol, that would reflect the order of the New Templars. And by the way, the original flag of that organization, the original symbol that they used for that, the Order of the New Templars, is a yellow flag with a swastika. and four floors de lis or something. It's like
Yeah.
a strange, like, yeah, but
The fleur de
it's
lis,
fascinating.
like that you
Fleur de
see it,
lis, yeah, there
that
you
you see it all over New Orleans, Louisiana.
go. 100%.
Yeah, yeah,
And the fact that, clearly this ancient Hindu, there's many different applications
yeah.
for the
True.
swastika. Yeah, but it's just hilarious that the Templars rebranded and used this yellow flag with I think it was a blue swastika or something like that. I can't remember now.
Yeah.
But like a
It
more
was
of a
Friday the 13th October, and in 1307 was that date
cult
that.
holiday, my friend.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. I think
This is
that's
why
where
these
the.
rituals happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole thing with these dates. And that's why it was like a bit of a sink for me looking at Hitler's birthday being April 20th, because
Mhm.
I've got the list here of these
Columbine,
dates.
Oklahoma City. I mean, how many different
You already
events,
know,
high
bro.
impact
So,
events?
okay, so check this out. Waco, April 19th,
Yeah, man.
1993. Oklahoma
Mhm.
City, April 19th, 1995. The Hoover Dam, we all know how occult that is. That was
Mhm.
April 19th, 1931. And then on top of all that, you have Easter falling on April 19th, many years. And that's Hitler's
Wasn't
birthday.
Columbine April
I don't
19th?
know. I'll
I
look.
believe
I'll
it
look.
was.
But
Yeah,
here's the thing. You talked about,
maybe it was the day after.
I listened to
Can't
you
remember.
on End of the World News once in this
Oh,
call.
Ben's great, man. Yeah.
Ben's great. Shout out to Ben. You talked about the rites of Ishtar, which was,
Yeah.
and how it's a springtime, it could be like a springtime sacrifice thing. They would time certain events so they line up with spring. And you've got all
Oh,
these ancient Easter rituals. And you also have the Feast of Venus that starts in April. In the ancient world, that was big. They had the Feast of Venus, and it's all to do with the goddess Ishtar, Venus, Aphrodite. It's all the same entity to them.
right. Yeah, that was something that blew me away. It was in the context of the Columbine massacre when I was listening to Bill Cooper, an old Bill Cooper video. And he starts, man, it's so emotional because it was legitimately just as the news broke about Columbine. And he's reacting in real time on his live show with call-ins and stuff about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And man, he essentially predicted that a major high impact of a false flag or mass casualty event would take place around this time. And he specifically said, and obviously, I mean, Columbine itself, there's so much to it. It feels like that area, geographically speaking, was some sort
Oh,
of hub for intelligence.
it was April 20th. It was
There you go, my friend.
it's all
Exactly.
these dates are it's the same date.
Hmm.
It's the same date.
Exactly.
Oh my
And
gosh,
that's
April
exactly what
20th.
his man, Bill Cooper's reaction. He starts tearing up and starts warning, this is going to continue to happen. Obviously this tragic loss of life, including vulnerable and innocent children who have yet to have, talk about potential extinguished, right, in terms of
Sure.
a life lost. And he basically gets into how he legitimately believed this played in the reason in which he could predict that this was potentially going to take place and then something did transpire is that the rites of Ishtar, Molech, and human sacrifice in the springtime. And he was essentially claiming that this all is oriented with or back to the ancient teachings of the mystery schools. And he goes into essentially how this is the it's blood sacrifice of the innocent in the springtime, which is in itself a reflection of um, basically it's in a way it's sort of the dawning of a new age, the age of Aquarius. This is all very kind of applicable in terms of the occult ideological kind of yeah, perspective in terms of this. But I will say it goes back to the Mesopotamian religion of these ancient gods and goddesses and this pantheon that I feel like is very directly associated with many different avenues of occult ideology and the way in which it's practiced. And that came up in the Delphi murders and the Hosanna Church scandal with the neo-pagan application of the blood ritual, and how they would go back to, because there was a group that I believe was responsible for the murders of Abby and Libby in Delphi, right, Louisiana and or Indiana, I mean, and legitimately staged their bodies, put deer antlers on the head like it was Odin hanging from World Tree. It was an ancient pagan ritual from Nordic pantheon of gods is how they applied it in their practice. But in reality, and they took the clothes off one of the girls and put it on the other girl, but left one of them naked, staged their body in the prayer position below the tree, and had the antlers secured to one of the victims' heads. And it's a legitimate, reflection of their belief system. And this was an initiatory blood ritual, and essentially, many detail. They call themselves the Vinlanders, and there's an ancient sort of Nordic text that you can read through called the Vinlanders, and it basically is what they fashioned their new age neo-pagan organization after. And they had patches like of loyalty, right? Loyalty patches they would wear. And members of the prison complex in Indiana were flaunting their Odinist patches of loyalty while they were basically torturing a victim inmate, Richard Allen, who they pinned this entire murder on, which in reality was this well-intentioned individual who had gone to the Monon High Bridge Trail the day the girls went missing. He went back home that day, and he told his wife where he was, and she said that the police are, a couple days later, I believe it was, the police are now asking anybody who went to Monon High Bridge Trail that day to come in and give a voluntary statement just in case they saw anything worthwhile and mentioning that could help them solve the case. So Richard Allen, with the best of intentions and a very unfortunate, naive individual who goes in, in good faith, thinks the police would act with him in good faith. And in reality, he set himself up to be entirely railroaded by the system so they could have a cover up, facilitated and basically tie this entire case around one man's neck who was, in my opinion, an innocent man. But anyway, point being, the Vinlanders, neo-pagans. Sorry to get off track, but it's just fascinating, man.
No, there's a thread here, I think, and it's very obvious. It's like an Easter, April, like you said, with Ben, rites of Ishtar thing happening here because, first of all, it's Hitler's birthday, also, and the Easter rituals to the Norse. That's Ostara. That's their Easter goddess, the goddess of spring. She holds the flowers, drops the flowers, and has like a summer dress on and everything, even in the old reliefs. It's kind of crazy. And that is the magazine that Hitler was obsessed with, right? Ostara. Did you ever come across that?
That's hilarious. Yes.
Yeah, remember Ostara?
I didn't realize that until just now that is connected.
They were very aware of these old Norse traditions, and they were integrating them. I think even to the point where it's something you brought up earlier, where Hess had Norse, or I guess runes, on his wizard's robe or whatever he was wearing, right?
Yeah.
Like they were, and that's what they were doing with Wivelsburg and the SS. They were fashioning these guys out of the Knights Templar, of course. And Bernard Clairvaux, he's one of the originators of the Templars. He came along and joined up with the other two who had been initiated in Istanbul. But anyway, there's all this rune magic that they're incorporating into that as well to follow this Norse thing. But there's this ancient occult thread that the elites follow, even to this day. And it goes back to all these groups, and it also goes back to the Sufis and the Druids and the Druze and other mystic orders that would produce Turkish Freemasonry. That's where you get Sipotendorf in all this. Right. I think he's one of the most influential figures on the whole of the Third Reich. Rudolf von Sipotendorf fashioned himself a Turkish Freemason and was a Sufi and was learning from the Druze and all these orders. And then you've got Egyptian cosmology in the mix, and these we've heard it a thousand times, and I've probably said it myself. We know that the billionaires today, they follow the stars. That's your Egyptian cosmology. You see that
100%.
all over the place. So all this, and then the Hoover Dam artwork, the Hoover Dam memorial thing, there's
Yeah.
occultist stuff all over that, and that's April 20th too. It's like, what
Hmm.
what's really going on here?
For sure, man. And that's I think it was Ansatz was the ancient pagan rune that they utilized in the Delphi
Mm.
murders, and was very well, basically there was a task force that was established to investigate the Odinist crime ties to the crime scene, and they legitimately established the fact that this was it resembles the letter F, essentially is what it resembles, but it was the blood of Liberty German used as the paint to mark a tree with a rune that looks similar to the letter F. And obviously this is an ancient rune that could be identifiable as one of the many calling cards of this pagan religious cult. And it essentially was Ansutz, right? Was the basically what it represented. So interesting, because I looked up what obviously the rune is any of the characters of any of several alphabets used by the Germanic peoples from like the 3rd to 13th centuries or something was the time range, I believe, and many of the runes look like the letter F, right? And I mean, I
Mm.
legitimately just rewatched one of the Hobbit movies, and I saw that on the talisman that one of the dwarfs was just tossing up and down in a prison cell, and it was F, the letter F, Ansatz, which is legitimately an ancient rune, and stands for Odin, right? For one, it stands for a few different things, but Odin being the primary. And so basically, that was discovered at that crime scene. So again, yeah, you have this direct overlap that's almost impossible to deny, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's J.R.R. Tolkien was also fascinated with the same Norse
100%.
mythology. He was reading and drawing heavily from that Kalevala Finnish folklore, but it was Scandinavian. It was Finnish and Swedish as well. And I think that's how you get runes showing up in Lord of the Rings.
100%,
Yeah,
man. And I mean, it's so applicable, honestly, as far as just the plot line of the Lord of the Rings in general and the Hobbit series. I mean, he was at the very least, we know he was attempting to sort of portray the environment and circumstances of World War One and the trench warfare, and as far as Mordor, almost representing that environment of trench warfare that he experienced in World War One. And I mean, to see the level of sophistication, technologically speaking, it was in this strange sort of interim period where it was becoming far more sophisticated and technologically speaking, but in this very kind of growing pains way, right? Like we're talking the most extraordinary level of suffering you could ever imagine experiencing in that conflict. I think it, makes World War II pale in comparison in terms of, look, I'm not saying there wasn't torture and mass death in World War II, but World War One, in terms of the circumstances on the front lines of the conflict, it's it's out of this world in terms of your ability to even conceptualize how kind of uh just the level of yeah, it's just hard to, it's like Middle Earth, right? It's like Mordor
it's
in a
like
way, is
yeah,
is really,
yeah.
it's
And
so sad.
I had a guy on, and we talked about this about the blood that was being shed in World War II, and how they shamans could have been on site using that like they did in the ancient times. When the something about this guy was breaking it down, he was doing a great job with it, but something about the blood hitting the earth is useful in rituals. So
Yeah.
that could have been happening too. But one of the things I forgot to mention was in regards to this, because that's a cool find. You're seeing this F rune in the Lord of the Rings. Well, Himmler was sending in a team of people into those Finnish forests to seek out things in addition to the Kalevala that Tolkien was reading. So
Wow.
I've got a whole thing on it. Himmler had a branch of the Ahnenerbe Society go into these woods in Sweden and Finland and talked to witches. And they were recording. They had a guy named Bose who was a Nazi musicologist who was going in, and they were having the witches sing these like folk magic songs that have spells in them, and they were recording it,
My God.
and they were bringing it back to Himmler. And it's like, what were they doing
Wow.
with this stuff? What were they doing with all these spells and stuff? It's absolutely crazy, man.
That is insane. My God, man. I
Dude,
know
that out of Nerve Society is off the chain, man. We should talk
I'm
about
gonna
that
have
sometime.
to, yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that because that is fascinating. And I think what is it? They called Rudolf von Bottendorf. He was a baron, wasn't he? They called him Baron von Bottendorf as well, and he was basically disappeared right at a certain point when he was because he was basically adopted at one point by a German branch of his family. I think is the way in which it went, and he became a Turkish citizen, but he seemingly was. He was sentenced to some sort of charge at one point. I think it was where he was like a swindler allegedly and a forger, and he experienced like 4 years, I believe, where he either was imprisoned. I'm not entirely sure what the record is on that, but it's interesting. But you go into the fact that, he basically, after becoming a citizen, his in Bavaria or something, he was I think it was 1917 and 1919. He had like a legitimate footprint for a brief moment, and then after the fall of the Soviet Republic in Munich, I believe it was, he basically returns to Istanbul, and then he traveled at one point to Mexico and the U.S. apparently, and then turned up again in Munich and just before the war in 33. And this is when he engages in the reviving of the Thule Society, apparently, and then inevitably disappears again in Turkey near the end of the war. And a few different people have claimed that he was killed by the Nazis, but they have no proof. And then Sabotendorf, obviously, I mean, just the fact that he disappears is interesting enough, right? But
It's
yeah,
yeah, it's his death is shrouded, and parts of his life even like you're saying are shrouded in mystery. But I suspect that maybe he met a similar fate as did Otto Rahn, because Otto Rahn, I'm pretty sure they killed him. He
yeah,
died. They found him dead underneath a tree in the dead of winter with his clothes off, and it looked like somebody had taken him out there and done away with him. And I
right.
think that there's an element to this where the Nazis would clean up their tracks,
Yeah. I think
especially
that's
when it
exactly
comes
what happened. I mean, it's the same thing
to
that
this
happened to
occult stuff. Because
100%.
honestly, Austin, I really believe that they did not want the rest of the world to look at them and see a cultist. I think that they tried to hide that.
I do too. I think it's definitely the reason why it's not a part of the official narrative or a version of events and tied to the conflict. I mean, you rarely see it mentioned as far as just the most mainstream and prominent versions of the narrative. They're not even going to touch on the occultism, and that in itself is problematic, right? Just as far
Mhm.
as it's a key component to understanding how this even could have taken place. But can I
Yeah,
let my
and
dog
look how
out real
much.
quick and I'll be right back? Would you mind? I'll be
Yeah,
right
no,
back. I gotta let my
sounds
dog
good.
to the.
Okay. After a quick break, we're back. And yeah, just I just wanted to follow up with something you were saying there that I think is important. I think that this is just overall it's important information, and I think it's a crucial part of the story. And look how much ground that we've gained by talking about this, or being willing to talk about this too. Being willing to not only talk about it, but look into the situation, do some in-depth research, and then just being open to talk about it. I mean, look how much ground you can cover if you're just willing to go there.
Man, and it's crazy how much it honestly does overlap into modern day, and
Yeah.
it's just directly applicable to the vast majority of things that that we are kind of, just as far as what we're plagued with in terms of the oversaturated environment that is the demoralizing media cycle. It's just nonstop and incessant, and I think it's a part of attempting to demoralize you and keep you from asking the right questions. And as long as you're willing to, yeah, just unapologetically, pursue the truth in that way, and no matter where it takes you. I think that's actually how I even described in my very first episode I ever covered. I think I quoted Ron Paul, and I said, "Truth is treason in an empire of lies." And I basically was just reminding everyone that, and I think I introduced the show as this podcast is for people who are basically unrepentantly pursuing the truth, right? Unapologetically pursuing the truth, no matter where it leads them and no matter what the cost. And, so unfortunately, we're going to have to take some direct blows throughout the process. But I legitimately do believe that it's all for the greater good, because unfortunately, they want to keep us from asking the important questions, the questions that matter most, the questions that will lead us into this, fundamental framework of how this system is truly structured. And only then can we kind of identify the power brokers from the political puppets. And the moment we can do that is the moment that we can hopefully isolate our common enemy, and once and for all attempt to extinguish it. But only then can we realize we can bridge that gap. We honestly don't disagree on the vast majority of things if you just peel that surface layer, and dip your toe below that surface, and for a brief moment you realize that we share this common enemy, and it's something that I hope and I think people are waking up to that fact, and more so now than ever. And I think as much as there are black pills, all around us, and I myself am even occasionally criticized for potentially offering up a black pill, but I think it's just a misinterpretation of what I mean, because in reality, the fact we're even having this conversation is hope and inspiration for me, and leads me to continue down this path, and almost reinforces that this is the right way to approach life. And only through honestly questioning, at least for, I try to maintain the outlook and perspective and approach of, I have your best interest at heart. At the very least, that's what I hope for. And that's when I think you can somehow manufacture that defense mechanism and put it in its proper place to engage with this power paradigm, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can kind of move
powerful
forward.
information.
Yeah, I think so. And I see just as far as the level of German occultists or occultism that played into the rise of the Thule Society and the rise of the Third Reich. I mean, it's undeniable at this point that we have just this overt and overwhelming connection to this Catholic military order of the Knights Templar being directly and heavily involved in the formation of the Thule Society, and this very similar hierarchical structure that was even utilized in sort of implemented within the context of the Order of the Cistercians, right? Which we had mentioned just briefly for a passing moment, and that allegedly had even been responsible for training the New Templars founder, right? Who had mentioned Adolf Lanz, who basically, was fundamental in the lead up to the German Orden, which basically before the Thule Society, you had the German Orden, which was the Order of the New Templars, Ordo Novi Templi, which again, this is very important to understand the level of just again, they implemented this new age form of Ariosophy, is something they called it, which I had mentioned as well. And this was a combination of this kind of esoteric what was described as esoteric piety with concepts of racial science and eugenics. So this is where you have the major eugenics, essentially, what's it called? Um, um, not just eugenics, but there's an additional term that is affiliated. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Well,
Point
I think that's
transhumanists
what I was gonna say.
yes,
I was gonna say you might be thinking of transhumanism because they're pretty
that's the
much
term.
one and the same. I was gonna say
Yeah.
technocracy,
Hmm.
transhumanism,
You got it.
yeah,
You got it, buddy.
the Huxleys and the eugenics and all that. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Which
I'm really happy that we touched on that Templar thing. I just want to say that because I've done a lot of work and study in them, and I do want to add that it's a convoluted history with the Catholics being involved with them.
right.
A big part of the Templar order, they actually weren't Catholics. They were just working with them at on and off throughout points in history. But the Catholics had a big problem with the Templars because of the Templars were actually worshiping the goddess and had a lot of other very occultic beliefs that were at odds
So
with the
interesting.
church. So it's an interesting thing. But I think that the true core of Templars who did worship the goddess and venerated Odin and Woden even, and had we've heard about the Baphomet stuff as well. That I
Right.
think was probably the group that the Nazis were drawing heavily from. Like Sabotendorf, I think, was more involved with them.
Yeah. I think so as well. And this is what led to the formation of the core Nazi occultist circles
Yeah.
formed the tool. And as we mentioned, the fleur de lis or whatever on the, the flag of the swastika involved with the Order of the New Templars. I mean, that's not at all a coincidence, right? That the tool and the Nazi Socialist Party would then obviously implement the very same symbolic reference point as their symbol for yeah, it's too difficult to separate those things. But yeah, so anyway, I think the formation of this Ubermensch, right, this Aryan Christ figure, this was a real concept. This manufactured false prophecy is how I viewed it. But we're talking, you had mentioned the ruins of the Werfenstein castle, or which castle did you mention? Was it
Uh, Wivelsburg.
Bivelsberg? Okay. Well, I know they had set up a few different,
Oh yeah, they
just as
had.
far as, I mean, wasn't Himmler his SS the castle that they were performing blood rituals in, right? They had a pentagram down there, I believe, and the what was it, the Black Sun, right?
They
As
had the
far as
Black Sun that I know of
Mhm.
in the marble
Yeah,
floor. Yeah.
which again, this is
That's where they had
ancient.
Carl Williget. They had him. He was like the shaman. He was like a high priest. He was running the whole thing like an ancient magician would. This goes back to what you're saying
My
earlier
God.
about the ancient teachings of the mystery schools. Like that was, I think that was taking the wheel the whole time with this. Himmler was
Oh
just
yeah.
letting it loose with that. Himmler was, in my opinion, was undeniably an occultist, as
Oh
was
yeah.
Hess, as was Rosenberg, and a couple others.
Hmm.
Top Nazis were definitely like real true blood occultists.
100%, man. I know it
Yeah.
was they called it the Germanic Messiah is what they were heavily trying to reference in terms of
Mm.
this sort of Hitler kind of the what they wanted people to view Hitler as was this Aryan Christ figure, very much. And I think they had him kind of strategically waiting in the wings as they fully constructed the myth around him. This is for sure how it seems. And it's just as far as Adolf Hitler even used the term, I think in terms of the yeah, it was point 24 of the 1920 Nazi Party platform. He stated, "The party as such represents the viewpoint of positive Christianity." And this was something that apparently played a significant role in the attempted conscription of and exploitation of basically the different denominations within German Christianity, within Christianity in Germany at that very time. And so it would effectively render them fiercely loyal to the state, was, I think, the end result and the ultimate goal. And again, it's the same of the 19th century model of the Prussian model of education, right? It's the exact same sort of philosophy in a real way, right? Is it mass indoctrination? You know what I mean? It's like, obviously, right, in terms of conscripting your population, and mass education or mass indoctrination, because I would have to side on the indoctrination aspect of it. And it was mainly to keep the peasant class from shitting themselves in fear and running away from the front lines, because they were in no way willing to sacrifice their own lives for the king. I mean, who the hell would be, right? And let alone the assassination, right, of the major leader in Germany just before the Thule Society took over. I think that's a major. And by the way, the assassin was trying to become a member of Thule. That's what they were exploiting him and leveraging him to essentially, yeah, this is fascinating. This is what, and effectively destroyed the old model of rule and structured government in Germany, was through this major assassination that took place from this individual who was basically promised he would be initiated into the Thule if he went through with this. And inevitably, I think they gave him a baronship or something like that later on as a reward. But he was inevitably housed in the exact same cell that Adolf Hitler would write Mein Kampf in, which I thought was just absurd that you had a direct connection there, right?
Yeah.
But not surprising at
He
all.
he
But
was with Hess when he wrote that. Side note, Hitler was locked up with
wow,
Hess when he wrote that, and Hess was bringing in occultists all day to come in and counsel with them.
wow,
So
so
there was a milieu of
so crazy.
a what do you call, like a door, like people were just coming in all day and hang out, and they were occultists. There were people in George Gurdjieff's circle even that were coming to visit
Wow.
Hitler.
Oh my God,
I
man.
mean, it's
I
just
know.
the more you dig into it, the more you just tack on all these little things, and you start to see the bigger picture.
Yeah. It was so a revolutionary. His name was Kurt Eisner. Okay. So he's the individual. This paved the way for the ultimate power vacuum as far as the German politician and revolutionary named Kurt Eisner. And so he was a socialist journalist, allegedly, and organized the socialist revolution that overthrew the Wittelsbach monarchy in Bavaria in November of 1918. So that's how they overthrew the entire, just the German monarchy, right, that had been ruling over German society for generations. And so it was only in 1918 that this assassination essentially, well, first it was the individual revolutionary Kurt Eisner who staged, right, the socialist revolution that overthrew the monarchy, and this was in 1918. And this inevitably led him to basically being described as the symbol of the Bavarian Revolution. And so Eisner then joined this group called the Independent Social Democratic Party of Germany, and this was by 1917 at the height of World War I, and was later, within a year, convicted of treason in 1918 for his role in inciting a strike of munitions workers. He spends 9 months in a cell at Stadelheim prison, and then is released during the general amnesty in October of that very same year. So after his release, Eisner organized the revolution that overthrew the monarchy in Bavaria, the German Revolution. He then declares Bavaria to be a free state and republic, the People's State of Bavaria, on the 8th of November, 1918. This is the first, he becomes the first republic premier of Bavaria at that time. And so around November of 1918, he leaks documents from the Bavarian plenipotentiary in Berlin, which apparently outlined some sort of deliberate conspiracy that he thought proved that the war was caused by a, quote, small horde of mad Prussian military men, as well as allied industrialists, capitalists, politicians, and princes. So then at the Bern Conference of Socialists held in Bern, Switzerland, he attacks moderate German socialists for their refusal to acknowledge Germany's part in bringing about World War I. For that very speech and for his uncompromising hostility to Prussia, he became bitterly hated by large sections of the German people, allegedly. Now, this is when it all takes a turn. Eisner was assassinated in Munich when German nationalist Anton Graf von Arco auf Valley, sounds like Lee Harvey Oswald almost. It really does, though. It's a strange name.
Yeah.
Shot him in the back on the 21st of February, 1919. At the time, Eisner had been on his way to present his resignation to the Bavarian parliament. Multiple reports claim that Arco Valley may have decided to assassinate Eisner to prove himself worthy after being rejected for membership in the ultra-nationalist and Germanic neo-pagan cult, the Thule Society, because he was of Jewish descent. The killing of Eisner made von Arco Valley a hero to the far right. His fellow students at the university publicly proclaimed him as a hero, and basically his action triggered retaliation by a lot of different communists and socialists, anarchists throughout Munich, and apparently there were a lot of different deaths and killings that occurred at that time, including Prince Gustav of Thurn and Taxes. So it looks like you had like members of the monarchy that were still being targeted for assassination. And you had, because of course you would want to, in the middle of a power vacuum, a major power struggle, you would want, obviously, I mean, you go back to ancient Rome, the first thing they would do is, essentially murder your children, because they didn't want any vie for power that was genuine or authentic, that people that could gain people's support publicly, public support for an individual to basically take their place in the line of power based on their genealogy. So I think
or
that makes a lot of sense to me.
Or foment coups.
Exactly.
People that are going to start like little incel rebellions. I think that's why Hitler later turns on the secret societies, especially the Masons. They represented a group that could rise up against him, and he didn't like that. And I think he was like, "Well, we're the new order in town."
Exactly.
And they sucked up what they needed from the Masons. They even took their libraries. They were all those castles we were talking about earlier. They were stocking all those castles up with occult books and literature.
Man.
So yeah, man.
I know Himmler, and I'll for sure at least like detail a little bit of the most damning aspects of his direct connection and affiliation to occultism as far as Himmler is concerned. And you can stop me whenever you want. I feel like the point being, as far as this individual assassination and this ultimate power vacuum that was occurring at the very same time, that it was just perfect timing in general for this to have been playing out, right? And I think it was Eisner after he assassinated. So Eisner's assassinated in Munich, right? And again, as I said, by Anton Valley, I believe was his name. And again, this individual is trying to basically become initiated as a member of the Thule Society in doing so. And he basically is immortalized as a hero at this time. And here's the interesting aspect of, although clearly they were targeting and assassinating members of the monarchy, you have all this internal fighting breaking out within the government itself. And so this is what ultimately became the major power vacuum. And so you have the Marxist-Leninist Bavarian Soviet Republic being established off the back of this. And Eisner's death, as Hitler even wrote himself in Mein Kampf, he says, only hastened developments and led finally to the Soviet dictatorship, or to put it more correctly, Hitler says, to a passing rule of Jews, as had been the original aim of the instigators of the whole revolution. Arco Valley was subsequently tried for murder in January 1920, found guilty and sentenced to death. The public prosecutor said of him, "If the whole German youth were imbued with such a glowing enthusiasm, we could face the future with confidence." That's what the public prosecutor said about the assassin who murdered Kurt Eisner, this major revolutionary. And so a final point, the surgeon who'd operated on Arco Valley, because he was hurt basically in the process, Ferdinand Sauerbruch, he also praised him. He said, quote, "For me, there's no doubt that this man committed this deed out of a conviction that he was thereby doing his fatherland a service. If only one single person in the revolution had done this work with such clean hands." That's,
That's
I mean,
they were
public
primed.
sentiment.
People were primed and ready for this.
Hell yeah, they were, man. It's fascinating stuff, man. And there was a judge as well who was sympathetic. He says, of course, there could be no question of a deprivation of civil rights because the actions of the young politically immature man did not arise from base sentiments, but from ardent love for his people and fatherland, and were the result of the indignation against Eisner that prevailed in wide circles of the population. And following his sentencing, Van Arco Valley made anti-communist and nationalistic statements to the court. In response, the entire courtroom broke into applause, lasting for minutes. The following day, the Bavarian government, I mean, imagine if this happened in real time, right? Somebody committed an assassination of a political revolutionary and then was just lauded in public as a hero.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
It's wild. It's wild.
it is. So,
And
Justice Minister.
he was trying to get this was you're suggesting that this was perhaps part of an initiation for him to join the Thule Society?
Yeah, and I think they played him too because he was of Jewish birth, and so he was never going to be accepted allegedly. And I think they were well aware of that fact, and they kind of just hung him out to dry, and then sort of gave him a few little kind of let's just say I think he did inevitably receive a pardon at the end of it all, if I remember correctly, because it was a justice minister and German Democratic Party politician named Ernst Müller Meiningen, and he passed the unanimous resolution commuting Arco's sentence to life imprisonment. He served his sentence at Landsberg Prison in cell 70, and in 1924 he was evicted from his cell to make way for Adolf Hitler. He's released in 1925 and was on probation until 1927 when he was officially given a pardon. So
to
that
make
was
way for Hitler in what way?
in the exact same cell
Oh, I see. Okay, so
at Landsberg Prison.
that's right, because Hitler was locked up with Hess, like I said. That was in 1923 through 24. And it was following the beer hall revolt that they did, where they were fighting in the streets. They were trying to gain control of this narrative, and people were getting shot. I think Hermann Goring took a bullet during one of these, and some of their colleagues died. Now, these were I think they were the brown shirts at that. They were going around wearing like uniforms that are brown and everything. And what they would do is they had flags somehow dipped in the blood of the dead Nazis that they kept with them the whole time. Himmler would bring out the blood dipped flags at the SS stuff, like their ceremonies from these early revolutions where they were dying in the streets for this. It's crazy, but I think what's important for people listening is like the significance of the Thule Society. Goring was also, you had to dig a little bit, but he was a member of the Thule as well. Hess was. Himmler came along later. He wasn't actually in it, but a lot of those early Nazis were in it. And it's this occult order that starts by two occultists, Walter Neuhaus and Rudolf von Sabbatendorf. They put it together. Over time, it becomes more political, and it becomes the German Workers' Party. Then it becomes the Nazi Party. So everything goes back to this Thule Society. I just want to lay that out for people.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. I think the crux of what exactly filled that power vacuum that was manufactured, and I think by design as well. And and something that people should be far more aware of is the level of control that Thule kind of implemented throughout the process of infiltrating and establishing itself systematically, in a real way in Germany, leading up to the takeover and kind of a power vacuum being entirely controlled and filled. But yeah, I just thought Heinrich Himmler, as far as the pivotal role that he obviously played I mean, really the cultivation of the occult environment that was surrounding the SS at the time, and I mean deep levels of interest in occultism, and I mean Himmler himself was probably one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany, and a leading member of the Nazi Party, and I mean primarily known for being one of the main architects behind the Holocaust, right? Is what most people at least are under the impression. And I think Himmler was interested in basically mysticism from a very early age, right? And he tied the interest in mysticism into basically this ultra racist philosophy, right? Where he's attempting to look for proof of Aryan and Nordic racial superiority from ancient texts. And he even promoted a cult of ancestor worship, right? Is basically what he was promoting, and among the members of the SS, he's promoting this as a way to keep the race pure and provide immortality to the German people. And so,
Yeah, this
uh,
goes back to real quick. This goes back to what you said earlier. Blavatsky, some of her teachings
mhm,
are integrated here because Blavatsky believed that in Hyperborea, and that the capital of Hyperborea was Thule. So
yeah,
they're tracing this back to these very much Nephilim-like ancestors who lived in this very much Atlantean-like civilization called Hyperborea that had a capital called Thule.
yeah, 100%. And yeah, this didn't come out of nowhere, right?
Right.
This was a yeah, this definitely was an occultist ideology with kind of this fusion of additional layers of kind of Germanic folklore, as we've been illustrating a little bit throughout the process of how they integrated all these various aspects into the perfect recipe and formula for deceiving the average German, and I think that's what inevitably took place is they played on and exploited that very level of desperation of the vast majority in Germany at the time, and you see, well, I mean, as Himmler's basically structuring this I mean, it's not him alone, but as he's obviously helping establish this philosophy within the SS, you have basically this strange kind of, just in terms of the SS alone and in general, this is allegedly the Teutonic Knights, right? Who had this? He specifically uh, just kind of references this Church of the Teutonic Order in Vienna in 1939 that was directly taken over by the SS, basically, right? And I found that to be interesting because this is basically the process of replacing Christianity with a new moral code that allegedly rejected humanitarianism and challenged the Christian concept of marriage and all these various aspects of these this sort of philosophy just culturally in Germany, being very much just, I don't know, the proper term is clearly disrupted, I guess, is and very much strategically, I think. But anyway, so you have Himmler in, I think it was 1935, right? He basically, in a research society that he founds, he searches for proof of the superiority and ancient origins of the Germanic race. So he's utilizing this research society called Annenerbe or something to that effect, the
Yeah.
Annenerbe.
Yeah,
And
that's the one I mentioned earlier on the Ahnenerbe or Ahnenerbe. Yeah.
Annenerbe, okay.
That's where there was a division of that Himmler sent up to that region of Finland and Sweden to look in the go deep in the forests and talk to the old sages and witches
So
there.
that was holy. I didn't realize that's exactly what you were referencing was
Yeah,
the work of this organization on behalf of Himmler. That's
yes.
hilarious, honestly.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. It was a guy named Fritz Bose and another guy, I could look him up, that went on that particular mission. But it really, Diana Nurbe, they sent people all over the globe or the earth. They sent people all the way down to Tiwanaku and or Lake Titicaca in South America
Hmm.
even. They were looking
Wow.
for the, every culture that has that sort of spear of destiny,
Hmm.
they were kind of there in search of.
That's why they inevitably founded New Schwabenland in Antarctica, right? Wasn't that through that exact same pursuit of essentially
Mm.
discovering these essentially these ancient why am I it's escaping me the
Like
term for
relics and
yeah,
artifacts and
relics, yes.
legends, all the
Hmm.
things, all the Indiana Jones tropes. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly it,
Um,
man.
yeah, I think that they were down there in Antarctica looking for that. And I think that they were up north too, at the North Pole. They were actually looking for the Hyperborea capital of Thule. I think they were looking for all that, but it was the first Antarctica mission was funded by Rudolf Hess and Hermann Goring. So, two Thule members.
Right.
So yeah,
Look,
there's something to
you
what
know
they were
what I
doing.
just realized is that there were these runes, or not runes, but these rings specifically that I believe it was Himmler. Let me see. Let me pull that note because it's fascinating. Basically, you had now, of course, the SS bolts, the lightning bolts, that's ancient runes, right? Like people don't realize how much that directly applies to what we've been discussing. And we're talking all the regalia and uniforms of Nazi Germany, particularly the SS symbols. Clearly, they're stylized lightning bolts. And it's essentially it's a logo of a pair of runes from a set of 18 Armenian runes, allegedly or Armenian. Yeah, I think that's it.
Oh, also,
Armenian, Armenians.
awesome. That's part of what the Anurbase Society was doing as well. They were looking at rock carvings up in Sweden and
Wow.
just Scandinavian rock carvings. They were documenting all this stuff, taking note of it, and implementing it as they saw fit. And I think that's how they were. It was the Anurbase Society, I think, that probably uncovered a lot of the runes that they would use.
Yeah. I think that's what it at least that's what it seems the implication is
Yeah.
in the documentation of the runes being accepted and sort of established as the symbols behind the regime because it was essentially the Armanen, I believe, Armanen. Not entirely sure. But that's the apparent name of the 18 runes that were created by Guido von List, right, in
Hmm.
1906. And so this is apparently ancient Suilo, or I'm not, again, it's hard to
Oh,
pronounce some of these things.
this is interesting. I just pulled this up. This is really interesting. Okay. So it says List saw these runes as being
Mhm.
connected to the ancient Aryan priest kings.
Of course. Of course they would be. So these apparently originally symbolized, as far as the ancient Sowilo rune,
Okay.
it was originally intended to symbolize the sun, but was renamed Sieg for victory. So this is where you get Sieg Heil. And this is the list of iconography allegedly. And Himmler modified a variety of existing customs to apparently emphasize the elitism and central role of the SS. And they had naming ceremonies, right, which replaced baptisms. Marriage ceremonies were also altered. And then you even had separate SS funeral ceremonies, which were held in addition to the Christian ceremonies. So they were separate entirely. And the SS centric, kind of fueled celebrations were all centered around occult holidays like the summer and winter solstices.
There you go.
I mean, that's ancient pagan ritual. I mean, that's what that is, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, oh my gosh. Okay, here we go.
Here's a couple of them. And you can see the one down at the bottom right looks like a swastika.
It does.
And
that's crazy.
There's one of these lightning bolt looking S's here. That's the one you're talking about. It represents Sig. That's exactly what you're talking about.
My God, man.
Yeah. This is
iconography.
This is interesting. I guess I'd looked past this. This is pretty much new to me. This is very interesting. 18 pseudo rooms.
Wow.
So, and I mean, it's Wikipedia, but I think that this is a good representation of what you're talking about.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, just as far as like Himmler emphasizing or really just kind of leveraging the existing customs of the German people into this new centralized role of the SS and even the occult connotation and iconography attached to it, then I mean, it's difficult, especially with the occult centric celebrations of the holidays themselves being around the solstices. That's directly a cult, in essence. And then you have the Totemkopf, right, which is the death's head symbol. And this was used in German military units for like hundreds of years. And I think it was chosen for the SS by an individual close to Hitler. I think his name was Julius Schreck or something to that effect. And Himmler basically placed like very particular importance on the death's head rings, and they were never to be sold or were to be returned to him upon the death of the owner. And that instantly reminded me of we're talking Lord of the Rings. It reminded me of the rings from, that the ring wraiths are essentially resurrected back from death by the necromancer to go pursue and track down each remaining ring of power throughout Middle Earth to effectively bring forward this new age, man. This
new age.
Right? It is really what it's about. It's crazy to me.
Which is what Crowley was talking about too. He's always talking about bringing in the new age. Yeah.
The age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
The phoenix rising from the ashes, the rebirth. It's the same for the solstice. It's the same reason that Bill Cooper talked about, the ancient rites of Ishtar and Moloch and sacrifice in the springtime, because it's the exact same sentiment, psychologically speaking, in the occult framework, is rise from the ashes, right? And essentially, it's the rebirth, right, in a real way. And I think that the age of Aquarius reflects the occult ideology in many ways, and that's almost what you see from this kind of recycled tactic of essentially it's a rebirth from death, right? And I think that rebirth out of death in a way, and it's a symbol of purity, but in the most backwards application you could imagine, obviously, as far as the occult.
Isn't that incorporated in the Oklahoma City monument as well? That sort of theme?
Yes, so is the Aurora goddess, the Aurora obelisk outside of the courthouse where James Holmes was tried, and basically the Aurora Dawn obelisk was in front of that courthouse in Colorado where they had the infamous James Holmes murder trial, and he was in a dissociative state throughout that entire process. And by the way, it's fascinating, the level of Columbine victims associated directly with the jury that was handpicked for the James Holmes case, and how there's a direct overlap between Columbine and James Holmes. And I mean, shouldn't be shocking whatsoever when we're at this point. Adam Lanza and James Holmes both referenced their therapists as the mind rapist, and went in very great detail about neurolinguistic programming, and legitimately being programmed to kill by a psychiatrist. I mean, he was in a daze, unresponsive whenever he was standing outside of his that theater, right outside of his car, waiting to be arrested by the authorities.
Wade,
And
probably
the
holding a copy of you know what, Catcher in the Rye.
for real though. And I mean, I think it was Officer Grizzle was his name, who was the first on the scene, and he said entirely unresponsive, like he was in a trance.
Yeah,
I mean,
which is exactly, yeah. That's what they said Hitler was like after his speeches.
oh my
Multiple
God.
people said, the people who were there in the room, prominent figures, even the ambassador to France, I believe it was, commented on this. They would see Hitler before and after the speech. During the speech, they said it was like something would turn on.
Mhm.
It was like, it wasn't like it was him anymore. It's like something powerful sort of came in, swoops down, enters his body, animates him, and it makes everybody fall under this additional spell. And then afterwards,
100%.
it's like he would just like melt down and sit down and just sit there deflated and is like lifeless. But during the speech, the life is in his eyes, and it's like powerful. It's like kind of scary. And they all said it was like he was in a medium's trance.
That's exactly what it was described as. I know Hitler at Pace Walk is one of the most impossible books to get your hands on, right? And it references this time under a psychiatrist that Hitler was potentially hypnotized and placed in a trance by psychiatrist Edmund Forster, which, by the way, you had mentioned the fact that it seemed like the SS during the onset of the war was running all over the world, essentially geographically speaking, tying off loose ends in a real way. This was happening, and I think it was destroying the evidence leading up to the fact, as far as Hitler's rise to power. And when we're talking about Edmund Forster, the psychiatrist, he concluded that Hitler was had a condition of hysterical blindness, and he claimed whatever treatment Hitler received based will never be known when he was under Forster's care, because in 1933 the Gestapo seized all psychiatric records related to his treatment and destroyed them. In the same exact year, Forster, the psychiatrist, happened to commit suicide conveniently. And so this is the story. Hitler basically reported an incident of hearing the voice. Now, keep in mind that all originally was reported when Hitler claimed to have been guided by a voice, which he referred to as providence. He gave it a name. He said, unless I have the incorruptible condition, I do nothing. Not even if the whole party tried to drive me to action, I will not act. I will wait, no matter what happens. But if the voice speaks, then I know the time has come to act. That's from Hitler's own words. So you have now people. There's much criticism out there in terms of the book written by Greg Hallett. I think he wrote Hitler was a British agent, which basically, not the best title, but still, if you read through it, it's very compelling, some of the claims that were made in it. And Greg Hallett, I'm not entirely certain of to what level we can vouch for his credibility, but definitely worth mentioning the claims. And so he basically says Hitler was in England in 1912 to 1913. And this was also a fact supported by the memoirs of Bridget Hitler, the sister-in-law's book. And so he proposes that Hitler spent February to November 1912 undergoing mind control training at the British military PSYOP war school at Tavistock in Devon and in Ireland. So Hitler's sister-in-law, describes him as completely wasted upon his arrival at her Liverpool home, luggageless. I had no idea he was ill. His color was so bad, I had an idea he was ill, sorry. His color was so bad and his eyes looked so peculiar, she wrote. He was always reading, not books, little pamphlets printed in German. I don't know what was in them, nor exactly where they came from. Now, Greg Howlett, in the book, the author proposes that this reading material was basically manuals from Tavistock. So he's claiming these were mind control manuals. Now, the Tavistock program obviously was a key element in the terms of planning the provocation of well, if you remember the Lusitania, just like with Vietnam, right, with the sinking of the um, what was the name of the vessel that Admiral Morrison was responsible for? Jim Morrison's father from The Doors.
Oh yeah, I know
Yeah,
it's
you know
the
what I'm
Gulf
talking
of
about.
Talking.
The Gulf of
Tonkin.
Yeah, the Gulf of Tonkin. I was thinking about the Maine because in the
Oh,
Spanish American War, you basically had William Randolph Hearst responsible for running propaganda against the Spaniards, and this is when he was responsible for being involved in the hemp industry, right? And he wanted to make sure this is when the propaganda came out with reefer madness and everything else that followed. Was essentially to tie cannabis to a Mexican weed called, and then come up with a new term called marijuana, so they could claim that Mexicans and Spanish were raping white women, American women, under the basically under the influence of this Mexican weed called marijuana. That's the first time it's ever been referenced as not cannabis, right? Which is hilarious. But
mm,
anyway, all throughout that time where William Randolph Hearst and his major, newspaper monopoly are sort of running this propaganda, they're also running the propaganda to get the United States and manufacture consent and get them involved in the Spanish American War. And so they realized they needed to stage a false flag attack. And so they sunk the Maine in the Spanish Canal, I think it was. I can't remember. And you specifically had a Hearst journalist assigned there, and he was waiting. He's like, "What the fuck am I doing here?" And he's like calling back to the States, like, "Can I come home yet?" And then Hearst is like, "No, stay." And there's a quote that I'll never forget. Of course, I'm paraphrasing now, so I did forget the actual quote. But the point being is that William Randolph Hearst sends word back to his journalist asset down in Spain, waiting for. He's like, "Why am I even stationed here?" And he basically tells him, you provide the story and I'll provide the war, or something like that, and basically telling him, stay put until we green light the sinking of the Maine and blame it on the Spaniards, and then we can manufacture consent for American involvement in the war. That's exactly what happened. They've been doing this for how long, right? And
mm,
so that the only reason that I brought that up is because, this is the name of the game, manufacturing consent, right? And I think
mm.
that the fact of the matter is, this is a sort of a long-standing tool that they've been relying upon for generations, right? And
Yeah, and the incorporation of rituals. I mean, I want to take it back just for a second because this in particular blows my mind. You were talking about the rites of Ishtar again. It's like Bill Cooper, I think, was talking about this, right? And
Mhm.
just this. I'm gonna give you this list again. Waco, April 19th, 1993. Oklahoma City, April 19th, 95. Hoover Dam, April 19th. Columbine, April 20th. Hitler, born April 20th. That's that's so crazy to me. And
Mhm.
I think that the Oklahoma City bombing memorial site is that has that theme of rebirth to it, like renewal through death or
100%.
something.
Yep.
Yeah, man, isn't that and I just think that there's something going on with these Easter, if you will, rituals, because this is right around the time of Easter as well. The Feast of
Right.
Venus and all that. That's just, and it's Hitler's birthday, man. Sorry, I had to go back to that for a second and just think about it because that's that's blowing my
Oh, it's
mind.
fascinating stuff, man. And I really do think that the Aurora, because the Aurora Dawn obelisk is 100% a factor and plays that very same vital occult symbolic role in the context of the James Holmes Aurora shooting, right? And just the fact that you have uh, just kind of like the the symbolic reference point as far as the obelisk in itself is obviously this ancient sort of symbol in its own right. But then you have the Aurora, the goddess Aurora, who's basically holding a torch, right? And this was erected in like 2003 outside of I think it was oh shit, what was it? Jefferson County Courthouse and something I forget now which courthouse it was in front of. I'm pretty sure that was it though, the one that James Holmes was tried at. But again, this is allegedly symbolizing a sort of a new age gateway, although Aurora herself
Mm.
is a sort of fertility goddess, right? And so again, if we're considering, the symbolic application to what this represented, right? This is the Dark Knight cinema shooting, essentially. But Anyway, it just I feel as if there is no way in which you can chalk this up to just a coincidence as far as the why would they have this more because the trial in itself was obviously in no way were they pursuing justice. It was a corrupt and compromised trial, and I do believe it was mainly for really public perception purposes only. And that's why they even had tried to administer a truth serum to James Holmes. If you see video footage of him when they have the paper bags on his hands for basically they're trying to get the gunpowder residue test done, right? And he's in a isolated interrogation cell essentially, and he just starts playing hand puppets in a dissociative state. He's like you can tell he's entirely at least it seems like he's just a victim of dissociative identity disorder in this moment, and in no way actively aware of the circumstances that he found himself in. But so I do believe that you know they apply this occult symbolic nature and this sort of strange wrinkle into many of these high impact events, and whether we're bogged down in the details enough to kind of become aware of that fact and acknowledge it in the moment or in hindsight. I mean, I don't believe these things happen coincidentally is the main point I'm attempting to
Yeah,
make, right? and
yeah, for sure.
and I definitely view this and who
You're
knows if Hitler was a mind controlled male prostitute, but I definitely think he was involved with Sabbatai and Frankis, and the fact of the matter is I think the Knights Templar connection to Thule and the Rosicrucian order and I mean this is all
yeah, that's
layered
crazy.
into it's fascinating, and but Sabbatai and Frankis, the
You know,
fact that
that's something real quick. That's something I missed early on in my research into the Nazis and just this whole cult thread. I totally missed the Templar connection. I saw it a little bit. I saw that Himmler was fashioning the SS after the Templars. Didn't really think much of it until you find out that a lot of the things that we talked today, plus Sabbatendorf was a Cistercian monk. And that's something I found out recently. The Cistercians were very closely, they were like, it was like the sister group to the Templars. Like they were close. You had the Tyrannesians, the Cistercians, and the Templars. They were thick as thieves. And yeah, Bernard de Clairvaux, who you brought up earlier, he was a Cistercian. He also helped start the Templars, so they were really close. There's just so much I could say about this, but that Templar thread is there, and I'm really starting to see it.
oh yeah, man. And it's definitely, I feel like the Neo-Templar resurgence, like legitimately played a major role in the reconstruction of the international occult sort of network in a way. It's almost like a broad sort of it's a wide ranging, it's almost the same sort of best way you could describe it is the tentacles of the octopus, right, in a real way. And that's what I feel like the international esoteric occult secret societies, which have been structured in this Renaissance, right? Following the Renaissance, I feel like it was restructured into a legitimate sort of established power paradigm that is now very easily kind of leveraged against us. And so I don't believe that. This is why you can see the Confessions of an Economic Hitman and the international, sort of just playbook as far as the corruption and almost just in terms of world leaders not necessarily playing a role right in that structure. They're actually just sort of the face of what the public perception is intended to embrace, right? But in reality, this is the reason why that the international cabal can essentially overthrow governments all around the world without any sort of accountability whatsoever, because this has been a long-standing systematic structure that has been integrated and well entrenched, and now it's basically unbeknownst to the vast majority. They can't even really spot and identify, the levers of power. And that's what I feel like. There's no real distinction between the CIA and Mossad, in my opinion. I just see one perverse network that leads into the other, and people are acting as if they have these. And I don't want to oversimplify it. I do believe that there are nuanced, kind of compartmentalized goals involved with these organizations. But at the end of the day, they are, in a real sense, sort of, this is a mutual benefit model, right? And I think that once we begin to realize that they sort of, for example, I believe Israel as the boogeyman is a sort of, manufactured sort of false framework, right? Not to say that Israeli policy is in no way outside of, no, we should criticize the hell out of Israeli policy, but to oversimplify it to the point where we view the average Jewish peasant as playing a vital role in right, this Jewish supremacy of some kind. That's ridiculous to me. And again, it's an oversimplification for people who aren't quite able to engage with the true structured power paradigm. And so I see for example, the Hitler at Pace-Walk connection that I had mentioned, and the fact that he could have been hypnotized and legitimately was working with a psychiatrist following his injuries during World War I. It started to make way more sense that he legitimately claimed that he had a vision, right, and listened to a voice, right. He said multiple times that this happened, and it wasn't just the first context that I had illustrated. He starts talking about how he basically, right after, it's during this mustard gas attack, right, when he was temporarily blinded and hospitalized in Pace-Walk, and this happened in 1918. And Hitler claims that essentially this was a divine experience for him, and vitally important to sort of his path to power. And he admits that he experienced a vision, right, and heard a voice from another world, during which he was told that he would need to restore his sight so that he could lead Germany back to glory. The voice insisted that Hitler had been chosen by Providence. Again, Providence is the voice and the name, and had been given a divine mission. Hitler was destined to establish a new social order, a new Reich, which would be established under his leadership. In his biography, in a footnote, it basically is purported that Hitler may have been hypnotized. So again, lending credibility here. According to a U.S. Navy intelligence report, which was declassified in 1973, we have an Austrian nerve specialist, Karl Kroner, who was working when Hitler was treated in Pace-Walk. The consulting psychiatrist, Edmund Forrester, this is when he concluded that Hitler's condition was hysterical blindness. Now, obviously, whatever treatment Hitler received, we'll never know, as I mentioned before. But you have a historian. To what?
Hysterical blindness.
Mhm.
That's
That's what they say.
interesting. That's
Very
that
interesting.
that implies something else happened. Like it's not a normal kind of blindness. That almost implies like a trance, or like he somehow entered some other state, and
Mhm.
that's why he was blinded. That's weird. And I got to show you something in a minute with in terms of these visions and the Germans. I got to show you
Yeah,
something in a minute.
let's see it, buddy.
Oh,
I
you ready
know.
for it now, or I did?
Yeah, I'm ready whenever.
Okay.
Honestly, go
All
ahead.
right. This is gonna play in. I had to pull this up. This is crazy. This is okay. It'll make sense in a minute, but there is an account that I came across, historical account here of these two Templars who had visions, and they had the visions in 1235 A.D. They were acting on information received from a German Templar. Hold on, let me figure out. So they were in Carthage. They were in search of missing writings of the heretical Marcon. They were in a grotto in a temple formerly dedicated to the city's queen goddess, Tanit. Tanit is another version of Ishtar.
Oh my God, man.
So what they're at is they're in modern day Carthage, and I looked up this site, and it's called the Carthage Tophet or something like that. It's a child graveyard where they were
Yeah,
sacrificing kids
mass
to the goddess.
sacrifice. Yes.
The Templars are there looking for like occult stuff, and they say German Roderick reports, and the apparition came to us. She was a figure clothed in a breath-fine dress of shimmering green, such that one could perceive the outline of a tall female, slim and supple, shining through it. She was a wonderful being. I'll skip through some of this. She said, I called you here without you being aware of it, at which Roderick asked for her identity. She answered at once, I am Isaiah, Ishtar. The folk who revered me in this place called me Asherah. The people in the north, who were your ancestors, knew me as Idun. Idun is like a
Oh my
Nordic goddess.
God.
Different people name me different names as suited to their own language. The German knight Emmerich said that they were both true to the Lord Jesus Christ and would never worship another deity. Ishtar, amused, replied, I heard your prayers to him, to my godlike brother, but he is in his realm, while I, his godlike sister, am here again for a short while. So I'm going to skip a little again. And she continued, you will find not far from this place. She just puts them on like a task. You'll find an ancient stone which bears the sign of my divinity and the symbol of the hand in greeting. I looked into that too. And that's the hand of Fatima, I think is what she was referring to, which is still,
Really?
it's still carved in the stones there in this region. So I was just trying to check out and see if like this is possible that these guys really had this vision, and most of it checks out. But this gets crazy because what comes out of this, okay, let me just read this part. The goddess Ishtar stated next, I had been appointed the deity for Babylon by the Godhead. The Babylonians were an excellent people, but the settlement of a huge Hebrew minority in their midst ruined the plan to make Babylon the world capital. Ishtar explained that a people closest in character to the Babylonians, the Germanen,
Oh
including
my
the
God.
Franks of German descent, had been chosen to build a new capital over a secret temple in which all your knowledge is to be deposited. This vision and these two Templars and what she's telling them is involved with establishing Berlin in the first place.
Oh my God.
Thus,
See,
Berlin Tempelhof was founded in 1237, right after this vision, because of this vision. And the new Templar realm was to extend south from Berlin to Vienna and as far as west as Paris.
oh my God, man.
So there's more to it. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but basically, this is part of the creation of Berlin itself. I went back and checked the historical records, and even the mainstream historical record says that Templars founded Berlin.
Wow, man.
And
See, this is all starting to make too much sense, my friend.
it does. And this is one of the things they did was she told them to build I don't remember how she worded it, but a temple, a secret temple.
Hmm.
And that is that's that Tempelhof part of this. That's still there to this day. That was the Nazi airport.
Oh my God. See, there is no way around the fact that they modeled. So, at the very least, the Carthaginians were engaging actively in child sacrifice in a real way culturally, right? And that they
Right.
originally tried to kind of like, I think, essentially run competing, countering propaganda in a way, and claim that this was all as a result of Roman, I think, and even Greek propaganda or something. But in reality, this was very well established that the Carthaginians were engaging and practicing child sacrifice culturally, offering up even infants, right, to deities in their pantheon. And I think it was Toffits or something to that effect, were the
Yeah,
burial sites that
yeah.
they discovered. And I mean, this is they even had what, cremated remains of infants, so they were burning infants alive as well, at least at certain dedication ceremonies allegedly that they were engaging in. So I don't know. I feel like the systematic level of child sacrifice was not at all overstated as much as they would like us to believe, right? And Carthage was culturally kind of a central hub for this level of ritual sacrifice. But
Yeah, absolutely. This is the site here. And I think this is one of the locations. I think this location right here where these headstone looking things are, I think that's where the Templars recorded this vision. And even here it says it was an ancient sacred area dedicated to Phoenician deities Tanit and Bel, located in Tunisia near the Punic ports. This Tophet is a hybrid sanctuary and necropolis. It contains a large number of children's tombs, which, according to some interpretations, were sacrificed or buried there after their untimely death. So there you go.
man,
And if
yeah.
you talk to the locals in the area, they say things like this. The term Tophet was originally used to designate a place near Jerusalem synonymous with hell, the
Oh
name
my
taken
God.
from the biblical sources. They were calling it that because it was such a dark place. They knew the child sacrifice was happening here. So it just had a reputation in general for being just
Mhm.
hell. And yeah, that's, crazy, man. Crazy.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. There's no way around the fact that this has been practiced, through these ancient cultures for I mean, human history, all throughout human history, right? This is,
Yeah.
I think, the sort of mystery schools and the ancient teachings were never lost. They were just there. There are vanguards in place that are keepers of the secret knowledge, the sacred knowledge, and I think that it is their role and sole duty to pass it down to only the initiated, and until we can only rely on the kind of the opportunistic windows of gaining a glimpse into that world for a brief moment, and hope to apply that to our overall framework of how this is sort of structured, because we're not intended to know the details. We're not intended to be well aware and fundamentally, exposed to how this all sort of was systematically entrenched. And that's why I think whenever you have all of these bodies falling around Hitler in terms of leading up to his sort of just fulfilling his role and taking his place in the powerful position in Germany. I think they very much were trying to tie off loose ends and cover their tracks, because you have multiple suicides, right? That effectively occurred. Not only was that psychiatrist Forster essentially, murdered, and then obviously they claimed committed suicide. It seems like that applies to a few others as well, including I think when Hitler was basically when he left the First World War, right? He's basically this awkward loner, is what he's described as, who had never commanded a single other soldier, even though there's this story of him as a war hero, right? That basically he overnight quickly becomes this charismatic leader who took over his country, and this just doesn't fit as far as the again, it's like we're intended to believe that Epstein came from nothing, right? Rags to riches story. And these stories don't necessarily apply except for within the context of deliberately deceiving the general public, because they would have you believe that, this can effectively happen overnight. And so, essentially you have this parallel of Hitler's experience that was found in a book completed in 1939, and it was titled The Eyewitness. And basically, you have uh, this individual acquaintance of the psychiatrist Forster, and basically you have Ernst Weiss is his name, and he flees Germany in 1933, the same year that Forster, Dr. Edmund Forster, essentially kills himself, right? So you have Ernst Weiss flee Germany at that very same time, and happened to commit suicide in Paris when the Nazis arrived. So it looks like this was just, sort of a matter of kind of, just in a way, as I said, tying off loose ends, but it does seem like it's a little bit more of following up on certain individuals who could poke holes in the official version of events and the narrative at least forming around one Adolf Hitler at the time. And so anyway, he specifically, before he died, he told of a German corporal named AH, which anyone would assume stands for Adolf Hitler, but you never know. So he refers to this German corporal as AH, but does not actually name him, as being blinded during a mustard gas attack and treated by a psychiatrist at Pacewalk. Uh-oh. So the corporal is described as a patient with an Austrian accent who has received the Iron Cross, which is exactly what happened with Hitler, and who happens to love the music of Wagner but hates Jews. This is the way he's described. So the psychiatrist hypnotizes AH and suggests that he must recover his sight in order to lead the German people. Perhaps you yourself have the rare power, this is a quote, which occurs only occasionally in 1,000 years to work a miracle. The doctor tells AH, Jesus did it, Muhammad, the saints. You are young. It would be too bad for you to stay blind. You know that Germany needs people who have energy, who have energy and blind self-confidence. So both Hitler and Pacewalk, which was written by Bernard Horstmann, and then also The Man Who Invented Hitler, which was written by David Lewis. Basically, they explain this metamorphosis in terms of the hypnosis, right? And they go into, so this German author, Klaus Haunt, he spent 15 years researching Hitler's youth, and he believes the event is, quote, the most significant event in Hitler's early life, and goes a long way towards explaining what drove him to become the man he was. In later years, Hitler described his experience in Pacewalk in spiritual terms, frequently identifying himself with Jesus Christ. And even at a Christmas celebration in 1926, he himself says, the work that Christ had begun but had been unable to finish, I would complete. So I'm just saying, like, when it comes down to
the
it,
spiritual element is here
Mhm.
through and through. Yeah. It's
Fascinating,
it's
man.
there, man. It's totally there. I started seeing it too. I'm like, man, they want us to think that the Germans were, I don't know what, like
Yeah.
they're represented as like atheists sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Just like that they didn't have any sort of spiritual inclinations at all. That's how it's represented in a lot of documentaries and stuff, but that is just not the case.
Yep.
And
And that, by the way, I thought as far as you have a former member of the Nazi Party, and this leans into the spiritual nature of what he himself, Hitler, was describing as far as his time at Pacewalk. And this guy's name was Gregor Strasser, and he was allegedly again a former member of the Nazi Party. And he he says listening to Hitler, one suddenly has a vision of one who will lead mankind to glory. A light appears in a dark window. A gentleman with a comic little mustache turns into an archangel. Then the archangel flies away, and there is Hitler sitting down, bathed in sweat with glassy eyes. The French writer Robert Bouches remarked, I looked into his eyes, the eyes of a medium in a trance. Sometimes there seemed to be a sort of ectoplasm. The speaker's body seemed to be inhabited by something fluid. Afterwards, he shrank again into insignificance, looking small and even vulgar. He seemed exhausted, his batteries run down. This is Francois Poncet, ambassador from France to Nazi Germany. He reports he entered into a sort of mediumistic trance. The expression on his face was ecstatic. In July 1919, working as an intelligence agent of the Reichswehr, less than a year after his release from hospitalization for hysterical blindness and Pacewalk, you have Hitler infiltrating the DAP, right? And this is in before Hitler came. Nazis took power in Germany and this is when you have Sabotendorf. And he claims the Thule Society as a primary source of the National Socialist movement. He says Thule people were to whom Hitler first came, and it was Thule people who joined him in the beginning. So this is obviously Thule. What I think they were founded in 1910,
Mhm.
and it was the Munich branch that was founded specifically by Sabotendorf, and that's you know, the German occultist, obviously, but
Mhm.
Adam Alfred Rudolf Glauer, which was a Freemason with an interest in Sufism, Kabbalah, theosophy, and astrology, and also an admirer of Guido von List and Lorenz von Liebenfels, was the founder of the Thule Society, which was dominated by high-ranking Nazis, obviously, and then you have a French author who shows that Sabotendorf's central idea was to form a militant sect of devotees comparable with Ismaili Fedayeen assassins, guided by their spiritual leader, the old man of the mountain. This is the language they use, right?
Mhm.
Sabotendorf spent most of the rest of his life in Turkey, as you said earlier, taking Ottoman citizenship in 1911. And according to a historian, Sabotendorf was initiated by a family of Jewish Freemasons in Thessaloniki, which was Salonika, the heartland of the Donme sect, into a lodge believed to have been affiliated to the French Rite of Memphis. So he eventually inherits the library of texts, apparently, on alchemy, Kabbalah, Rosicrucianism, and Sufism. And this is when he becomes very interested in theosophy and Freemasonry, obviously. And as they kind of establish in his little biography, he was then introduced to the Bektashi Sufis, and he goes on to describe in his 1924 book the practice of ancient Turkish Freemasonry. He talks about encounters with Sufism, especially the Bektashi, whom he dubbed Old Turkish Freemasonry. And he talks about in their practices, they had a set of numerological meditation exercises, which purportedly were for the subtle transformation of the body. And he even believed he saw Rosicrucian traditions, which preserved those esoteric teachings that modern Freemasonry had forgotten. So this was a vital, at least a vital sort of a kind of priority within the Sabatendorf version, right, of this obviously what this occultism that led to the formation of the Thule. And that's what I thought was so interesting, is that the Agartha playing into this, right? Because again, he kind of like leans heavily into the prophecy, and I think the Young Turks were a part of this as well, at a certain point, at least with his foundation within the Turkish, context. And yeah, it was this is when he directly up sort of like combines the descendants from Thule to the Aryan race, and this transformation into a super race by harnessing the power of Vril, which is why the Vril Society became, was essentially founded. And I think it was the mythical land you had mentioned, Ultima Thule, right? That was the vision in the furthest north. Nazi mystics identified it as the capital of ancient Hyperborea. So this was all within the context of Helena Blavatsky. I mean, it really is this old ancient occult teaching in a certain sense that they're leaning into and trying to kind of apply and adapt to this specific sort of geographical context that they could leverage it, and for their own benefit. So I do think this Nazism, man, and secret societies there's no distinction, man. You know what I mean?
There's no distinction, man. And while you're reading that, I pulled up some of my notes from my research, and it's a lot of the same thing you're saying, especially when it comes to the foundation of this dualist society. Like you said, it's Sabatendorf, and he had a guy that helped him named Walter Nauhaus as well. And they were all in. I got the list of the orders that they were in. They were Freemasons, Bektashi order. They were the Order of the Teutons. They were in the Bavarian German Order of the Holy Grail. And Sabatendorf, in addition to all that, was a Sufi Eastern mystic. He was a Rosicrucian, possibly, and had a lot of alchemical texts, so he may have been delving into alchemy. And he wrote the book on Turkish Freemasonry, and he was in Memphis and Mizraim.
Wow.
So all that is like they incorporated those influences, and they started this Thule Society. And there's no distinction.
No. And that's what I see with, I mean, just as far as you're mentioning the German Orden, and I think that was one of the Thule Society originally was its cover name, right? The German Orden. And it was basically, that was also called the Teutonic Order. So it's exactly what you're saying, is how is there really a distinction at this point? And they had this Volkish secret society that was founded in Berlin in 1912. And it was allegedly founded by Theodor Fritsch, and apparently a few other prominent German occultists from the List Society, right? And this is when you have the High Armanen Order, which we pulled up those Armanen runes, and basically their descendants from the Templars, I think, is the way that it's sort of presented, right? And that, to me, kind of fit perfectly, especially when the claim is that they wanted to reestablish the science of runes, which is obviously what the Nazi Party and the SS were leaning heavily into, was this ancient rune science, essentially, in a certain way. And I believe it was, if you look into how they were sort of like reestablishing this a rune system, it was like through the worship of Wotan, is something that I think it was Old High German for Odin, right? That's it's just amazing, because this is Nordic, and also sort of Templar based, right, in a real way as well. So you're having this this sort of paganist representation with a fundamental line of even more the Scandinavian aspect of Asgard, right? And these Nordic beliefs from which I thought was interesting. Aryan dominated empire is basically what they were talking about based on the Teutonic Knights. And so you had the German Orden, whose symbol was also a swastika, and it had a hierarchical fraternal structure, which was based directly out of Freemasonry. And they would also celebrate on the summer solstice. So again, this is important festivity dates for these Volkish circles of ancient Germanic folklore or something, combined with again these pagan the Templar beliefs. So it's just insane when you get into the details of what led to the creation and formation of Tool, just as a kind of a cult, just even um, ideological sticking point in a way, right? They were just kind of like very much the best of both worlds, sort of, in terms of the Germanic people. And so you had these mystics that were heavily involved in these German mystics, basically. And apparently, this is where you had the occult and magical philosophies kind of all intertwine to be taught to their initiates. And I think it was all through this prism of Nordic racial superiority, which very much blended in the anti-Semitism, right? So again, this is kind of how the anti-Semitism took priority in the cultural context. But the German Orden, they have a moment where they split into two in like 1916, allegedly. And so you have this schism that takes place, and there's an offshoot that then is formed, right? And this was the German Orden Wolfeder or something to that effect, which of the Holy Grail, which was apparently Sabotendorf joined this the very same year that it splits into this schism and provides an offshoot organization. And this is when Sabotendorf increases the German Orden's membership from around an exclusive 100 or something, or 100 or so, to like around 1,500. So he instantly started allowing more membership to initiate. And the Munich Lodge was heavily involved in the formation of these two offshoots as well. So this is when, in 1918 of August, you're formally dedicated with the cover name, the Tool Society. And it becomes a political organization and group which tried to present itself to the ordinary German worker, right? But yeah, in no way was that actually the true sentiment coming from the highest levels of the party. And I believe it didn't take very long, honestly, for them to attempt to kind of reform the structure of the officers and men in the political positions of the organization. And I think Hitler was originally described as he was described in this very like unimpressive way, like a tired stray dog looking for a master, is what he was described as by one specific source, which I found. Karl Mayer was his name, basically. And this is from, I believe, yeah, Captain Karl Mayer. Yeah, he was a German general staff officer, is basically who he was. And when he came out and said this publicly, obviously, I thought very interesting way to kind of define and describe one Adolf Hitler as he joins the Tool Society to become the new Ubermensch and Aryan Christ figure. It looked like he wasn't very impressive to the members of the Tool when he first showed up, right? Because they instantly are just like, man, essentially, he's looking for a master. He's a tired stray dog. And he said, and someone, quote, ready to throw in his lot with anyone who would show him kindness. That's how he describes Adolf Hitler. So, of course, I think it was by 1919, you had Hitler basically on course to becoming, well, he went to become educated, I believe, in Munich at some point at the university. And so at some point, I believe this is when members of the Tool Society began to kind of like, position Hitler as the sort of face and puppet they wanted.
He had a whole decade to develop too from that point. All of the 20s, Hitler
Hmm.
is developing, and he's starting to do the speeches and starting to speak up and talk. And I think at first he was just, going to these meetings, getting excited and talking out of passion. And somehow that developed into people resonated with it because he was passionate about it. And then he became this, he just, he had time to morph into becoming this powerful persona, but also part of that metamorphosis, I think, too, is this occult aspect where it's like, I don't want to go as far as to say he was channeling, but it seems like he kind of was at some point.
Absolutely,
When
man.
you got that guy who's saying it was like an archangel came into him. I mean,
You're right.
people were noticed. They said he was in like a mystic's trance and all this and that. So he had time to develop into
A
this
100%. I think it
yeah,
was no,
daunting
it was
figure.
Erman Rauschning, right? Who was apparently a former Nazi who broke with the Third Reich before he published several books denouncing Hitler, right? And he suggested that Hitler was a medium. How many times can people say a medium?
Yeah, exactly.
Medium transformed by powers that, quote, are something that is outside their true personality visitors. Their true, together, personality dash visitors. The medium is possessed. Once the crisis is past, they fall back again into mediocrity. It was in this way, beyond any doubt, that Hitler was possessed by forces outside himself, almost demoniacal forces, which the individual named Hitler was only the temporary vehicle.
Yeah.
I mean, what,
Yeah, it's
what are we supposed
wild.
to do with this, man?
I know. I know people having visions, talking to the goddess, going into trances. I mean,
Hmm.
and also you had, I just want to mention, you had Theodore Roos. You may have mentioned him. He was a co-founder of the OTO. He tried to revive the Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati. He's involved with this German occult, this 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 occultist movement that's fomenting in Germany, building up to the Nazi Party. You've got Roos and William Westcott. So
Hmm.
they're OTO, they're Masons, they're in the Brotherhood of Saturn. Westcott's in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn as well. And these guys were adopting many of Crowley's teachings as well. And these guys would go on to really, really influence the early members of the Thule Society. So what you have here is like just about every occult order imaginable on the scene and
Right.
influencing this thing.
It's insane, man. And I think this goes all the way back to but far, honestly, if you consider the notion of what was sort of in terms of ancient mysticism, right? And just trying to put this into just because I mean, really, we could trace this back far beyond the invisible college that they obviously reference in the 17th century. And then what became the Royal Institute and Royal Society, or evolved to the Royal Institute of International Affairs. This is kind of the staging grounds of today's modern centralized control in a real way. And I feel like when you draw it back, yeah, you mentioned Edward Bernays, obviously. These all were members of the Round Table and these various, fundamental policy steering organizations that
Mhm.
were far more influential than just policy. And yet they're hosting these global events and deciding our fate, for all global society in a real way, right? All of mankind, and our fate will be decided in a closed private room filled with unelected bureaucrats. And we have these members of, I think, all the way back, you can take it to as far as Tavistock being concerned with psychology of group behavior, and how they would implement organizational behavior basically through employing hypnotic type states, right? In a certain sense, this has been going on for thousands of years, and in many different cultures and religions. And hypnosis was basically just referred to in the past as casting a spell, right? I mean, that's really what it was, honestly, if we want to be honest with ourselves. And the same with, the trance or altered state of consciousness for mystics and mediums and shamans. I mean, uh, how many different kind of reference points can we have to make the same exact ultimate bottom line? I mean, and illustrate it perfectly. It's just too much. And if you look into, let's just say how the mind game aligns with hypnotic techniques and witchcraft. I mean, this is the perfect recipe, right? That they have sophisticated and established for generations to now be able to deploy. And I think at a level that is almost incomprehensible for the vast majority. I think MK Ultra went mainstream. I think we are literally being poisoned in our own food supply, and they can trigger you into a dissociative state with your cell phone. I mean, like, what exactly are we under the impression that we can, oh, I don't know, exercise free will at any given moment? Are you really that certain? Because, I'm starting to question how long has an individual been vulnerable enough psychologically to be legitimately removed from the ability of practicing free will, to have that removed from you, and talk about being a prisoner. That's something that I think most of us can't even imagine, is a trigger word, a trigger phrase, a code word. They can call you up, and since 1953, it's been established in documentation from the CIA, they can trigger you into a fully hypnotic state of dissociative identity disorder, right? Just a full hypnotic trance from a full free will state of mind over the course of a phone call, just by calling and mentioning a trigger phrase. Activate your layered programming. It's like watching The Manchurian Candidate. What did they do with the main character? They had to reinforce his programming by having him fake as if he got into a car accident while out jogging. And they put him in a private ward on a basically a private floor of a hospital, or some kind of institution. And he essentially, they run this false narrative to the public that Raymond Shaw, the main character, got hit by a vehicle, struck unintentionally while out jogging. But in reality, that was a cover story, so they could reinforce his programming on this covert floor of the hospital, which was only obviously being provided to members of the operation domestically in this covert way. And so the public wouldn't just walk into the floor on accidentally, and then see something they shouldn't. But what I found interesting is what do they have him do? They have him just go out and commit some active sort of a murder, right? But it's a murder with no sort of inspiration or motivation. It's just to make sure that he'll follow through with his programming if they trigger him in the moment. And so again, the claim is that you have a shelf life for Manchurians, and that you have to reinforce the programming by the specific handlers and operators who essentially implemented the programming to begin with, or it will phase out, and the victim and the asset and the target, or I mean, just as far as the asset, the Manchurian, will begin to wake up to his prior programming. And it's something that I always found to be fascinating. But
It's
I
crazy
could
how
imagine a world.
it's laid out in
What?
that movie.
Exactly.
Like that's the
Perfect.
Sinatra movie, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
they
if you
show you.
remember,
They show
Frank
you.
Sinatra himself, he was waking up to the programming, right?
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
realized he's having these nightmares, and he thought that he and the rest of his unit were basically at some sort of strange flower, like
Oh
it was
yeah.
nothing but old women in an event center room at a hotel, basically, who are presenting these different sort of types of flowers for gardening or something. I can't remember what it was. It was like some old woman's club for gardening, and in reality, that was just the cover programming, the first layer of programming, because in reality, they were all these international scientists who were conducting behavioral modification research on this unit of American soldiers that were caught in Korea, or I think it was Korea at that in the context, and basically had been suggestible enough to have this first layer of programming implemented upon them. And so throughout the movie, he's waking up, right, to the levels of programming that he endured while he was over there in the conflict, and he's realizing, oh my God, we actually didn't lose that individual member of the unit, to the enemy, before we were essentially, saved and put into.
Yeah.
Basically, he was realizing they were programmed, obviously, but
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said 1953, and that's what I traced MK Ultra back to as well, the Eisenhower administration, 53, 54. And it's interesting that that comes out of the CIA there at the time. You've got Morris Lyon involved with some of this, and let's not forget Alan Dulles. Now, that's MK Ultra, CIA, 1953. Dulles built that with a Nazi, Reinhard
yep,
Gehlen.
yeah,
So did it
it's
all,
crazy.
again, in the context of this episode, does it all go back to the Nazis or what? It just seems like it
Mhm.
doesn't. We could do a totally separate show on just that, the post-war Nazi clandestine network, which was vast. And I think it's perhaps one of the reasons why, something we talked about earlier was Nuremberg, and I think that they didn't want the Nazis to get off on insanity pleas, and that was one of the reasons why they didn't want to bring up all this occult element, all this stuff that we've shown today. They just didn't want to go there. But also, in addition to that and some other reasons, what if, you mentioned that that episode of yours was taken off YouTube. So there's still censorship involved with this. What if that's because there's a breakaway civilization still here today, like a Fourth Reich scenario? Because we know those guys made it down to South. Bormann made it out of Germany with they think up to $1 billion. They had shelter
Mhm.
and protection under Juan Perón. They had everything in the books that one would need to design a breakaway Fourth Reich. So honestly, what really was stopping them from doing that? I don't see much of anything stopping them.
No.
Plus, like I said, they had the post-war network. Well, they already had a spy network because of the war. They just kept
Mhm.
it. And after the war, all those guys got off. Many of those guys never even went to Nuremberg. They went elsewhere, and that network was churning and lucrative and making them a lot of money. And maybe it was like it was allowed to happen because, people in power said, hey, if you guys stop making war, Nazis, if you stop making war, you can help us make war and we can work out a deal and you can run our spy networks.
Uh,
I don't know. Could have been the first
Hey,
Epstein network and everything.
yeah, honestly. And I'm just saying that it feels to me as if this was far more in terms of, even understanding, right? Like, let's just say the protocols for the learned elders of Zion and things of that nature that you can point to that shows that there's this diabolical conspiracy below, behind the curtain, right? That is clearly attempting to lead the vast majority of people by the nose into accepting this fundamental version of reality that doesn't apply, right? And I see that with, as far as the aftermath of World War II, you see this strange sort of you know occurrence of, yes, the Nazi draft takes place, but you have individual Nazis who are basically taking up refuge all around the world, geographically speaking, even in terms of Operation Condor, things of that nature, right? Where it seems as if these are just geographical reference points to kind of this Nazi safe haven that was very well established in like Colonia Dignidad being a perfect
Mm.
example, right? Paul Schaefer, he's a member of the SS and a legitimate prolific pedophile, right? Who steals these children and flees Germany after being accused of, basically being brought up on charges of pedophilia. Fundamentally creating these organizations to essentially facilitate this level of abuse, and then stealing children and taking them fleeing to the Congo, right? And it's just absolute, or no, fleeing to, not the Congo, I'm sorry, fleeing to South America. I'm sorry, where was
Yeah.
Colonia Dignidad? It's escaping me at this moment. But
Yeah,
again, this
that's Paraguay,
Chile, Chile.
Chile,
Yep.
but they had these enclaves all over the place. They had enclaves in Chile, like you're mentioning, in Paraguay and in Argentina, of course. And that's part of this for me. I think they knew how to do this whole city state thing. It's like I just wouldn't be surprised if they had went down there because you had guys like Richter and guys like Borman who were involved with the governments down there with Juan Perón. They had everything they needed to set up their like an underground Vatican of of surviving Nazis.
Hmm.
That
That's what
I
they.
mean, maybe I'll call it a conspiracy theorist, or conspiracy theory, but I think that that very well could have happened, and there very well still might be some sort of a network down there with these guys, if they're
Right.
children at this point and grandchildren.
Yeah, yeah, and by the way, whenever they Colonia Dignidad's fascinating because
Mm.
they had basically recreated uh German society, right? They were all, it looked like it was out of 1930s Germany, right?
Yeah.
With the structure of the buildings, they were all only speaking German. Legitimately, it was like this Nazi safe haven within Chile at the time, right? And the dictator obviously was utilizing this area strategically speaking. Not only was he utilizing Colonia Dignidad to torture dissidents, but it was essentially also it had like a private airstrip. It had razor wire on the outside fence, fence lining the property. And whenever the cops inevitably went in and raided Colonia Dignidad to get Paul Schaefer out of there, and Paul Schaefer inevitably disappeared in the tunnel system underneath the property and was not found again. Right? It's very interesting. And
Oh
anyway, it
yeah.
turns
Who
out
knows how extensive those tunnels are? That's another thing. They probably got tunnels down there everywhere. But hey,
100%.
my earphones are dying. So
Oh, okay.
we're
We can get
gonna
out of here, buddy. We could
no,
do a part two, honestly, because
yeah,
I
man. I
was
know we can keep
perfectly,
going.
yeah,
They
I'm ready. Sorry,
we're
go ahead,
coming up
bud.
on we're coming up on 3 hours, so
Oh, shit.
we could probably start to wrap it up. But the only reason why I'm suggesting is because my headphones are dying.
Awesome.
But
Well,
this
hey,
was
I might as well make a final point
yeah,
on
sure. Go
Colonia
ahead.
Dignidad because I brought it up anyway. And
Yeah.
it kind of reinforces what you were saying or suggesting about like, you know, this interesting aftermath and just the systematic structure following World War II and how it seemed like potentially let's just say the Nazis didn't necessarily lose the war. The Germans lost the war, right? The German people, the average German people, unfortunately are the only ones who really endured the consequences other than the massacred Jews, I guess. But but the point being is that essentially you have this German intelligence service and German arms dealer and they're all basically involved in to some degree basically using and cooperating with Colonia Dignidad throughout the time of its existence, and it still is alive and well. They renamed it. It's no longer Colonia Dignidad. I forget its name now. I might remember here in a moment. But the point being is that essentially you have this strange cooperation playing out with the property at the point, and they had this creation of bunkers, tunnels, state of the art hospital with underground soundproof torture chambers. They had runways for decentralized production of armaments and modules. Now, it looks like this is through a historical research archive at williambranham.org. You have it was published in 2005, and it claims between Tuesday and Wednesday, basically when it was raided, the compound was raided. The Chilean authorities found on the colonia's premises, in addition to 3 arms depots, the quote secret files of the Colonia Dignidad. Now, according to sources of the investigation, in several folders, there were about 500 files of various political leaders and artists, as well as records of people who disappeared during the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet. One of these files had been given the name John F. Kennedy, and inside were 2 bullets of the same caliber that had allegedly been used in the assassination of JFK. The arsenal included dozens of surface-to-air missiles, rocket launchers, submachine guns, hand and cluster grenades, rifles, anti-personnel mines, automatic pistols, and a large amount of ammunition. As the investigation continued, officials even discovered weaponized sarin gas and revealed that the cult compound had indeed been manufacturing chemical and biological weapons. Now, you also had the what's his name?
Colonia Dignidad.
This is Colonia Dignidad,
and
my friend.
They had a box or something that said they had JFK
JFK with 2 bullets. I swear to you.
That's what I'm saying about this being a spy network.
Mm-hmm.
Like
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I won't go any further with it because we'll have to pick up and talk about that again.
I think we should for sure.
Yeah,
I'm down, brother.
That's too crazy. That is too crazy.
And also, on some weird parallel Jim Jones, Jonestown type scenario.
Yeah.
Well, some of the arresting officers who showed up to the raid that day at Colonia Dignidad, one was named Henriquez. Basically, they went into with 30 armed policemen in a caravan. And as the team made its way up the long dirt road, it was spotted by the Colonia's lookouts, who obviously gave warning. The caravan busted through a sequence of gates and only slowed as it approached the village itself. Enriquez had given orders to his men, should they come under fire, not to retreat, but to move deeper into the village for cover. To his surprise, this is what caught my attention. Resistance was minimal. Quote, the colonos were like zombies, or maybe like robots. Enriquez would later recall they were machines. On, off, on, off, on, off. They didn't change moods like normal people.
Yeah.
This is Jonestown all over again, honestly, in a real way. I mean, before Jonestown, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
fascinating, man.
Yeah, that's mind control, man. It's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was really good, man. I know we could keep talking, and I know we could, make this thing, keep this thing going for who knows how long, because we could just talk about things all day, which is awesome. I appreciate you coming on, man, and talking about all this, talking about your research, entertaining me too with the German stuff, the Nazi stuff. We didn't plan on talking about this. I just knew I wanted to ask you about it.
Yeah. Hey, buddy, I'm perfectly willing at any moment to have a conversation about basically anything. So
yeah, that's awesome.
I was very prepared to discuss the Vegas shooting in OKC. So at some point we'll have to come back around and touch on that maybe if you're interested. But
yeah, okay. Is that because I bet I asked you about that, didn't I?
It's all good. You just mentioned it. So as always, I took that and ran with it.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to do something on that, man. That'd be great.
I'm down, brother.
That'd be great.
Awesome.
We teased it a little bit today too with those dates. I know that Las Vegas was September. It wasn't in that April section, right. But still you could tie in. We'll just do another show on it. Yeah, we'll just do a show on that. That'd be cool, man. Yeah, I got one of my headphones died. The other one is hanging on by just a little bit. So tell everybody where they can find you.
Awesome, man. All right. Thank you again, brother. It was the easiest conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'm always interested to come back and open. So just get back to me on the scheduling. We'll make it happen. And awesome. Thank you again for the opportunity, man. This, like I said, just the ability to sit down with someone who I feel is, we share just in terms of, you're a like-minded individual and someone who gives me a little bit of, I don't know, it's kind of like I can breathe. It's refreshing, right? I can take a deep breath and for a moment feel like I'm not entirely alone in this, and it's like, that's what I love so much about these conversations and these opportunities. So it's nothing but love on my end, man. And I'm very excited for the next conversation. So everybody can check me out at the Underclass podcast and that's it. Nothing but love.
Okay. Yeah. Likewise, man. This was great. It was awesome to finally officially meet you and talk to you. We had a great conversation. I mean, this was just phenomenal. And I'm so glad I had you on, man. This was also, I could say the same about you. You're a class act, man. You're humble and you're doing it out of passion, and you want to, I think you just want people to know the truth, because we've been lied to all this time. And I see it, man. And I appreciate, it's great knowing that there's people like you out there, and it's great connecting with you, man. So we'll have to do this again. I'm looking forward to it as well. And everybody check the description below and go show Austin some love. Go check out his podcast, give him a like, give him a follow, and we'll wrap it up with that. Been another wild ride. This has been a good one. As always, break the mold, conquer the realm, and thanks for listening.